Good morning, and welcome to Day 2 of the Korea-Europe Peace Forum. This forum is organized by the Sejong Institute and the Free University of Berlin, and sponsored by Gyeonggi Province and the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. Today's sessions will focus on the theme of making a breakthrough to stalled relations with North Korea. The first session will focus on the academic, public health, and NGO perspective, and the second session will focus on the European perspective. Before we get started, please allow me to make a few brief announcements. Like yesterday, today's sessions will be conducted in English, but you can listen to the Korean interpretation using the device at your seat. Second, we would like to ask everyone to please mute your phones during today's presentation and discussion session. Finally, we are filming today's sessions, so please be mindful of the camera at the back of the room and avoid walking or standing in front of the camera. Today's first session will be moderated by Sang-hyun Lee, President of the Sejong Institute, and will include presentations by Nam Sun-song, President of the International Society for Korean Studies and professor at Osaka University of Economics and Law. Ki Park, Director of the Korea Health Policy Project at Harvard Medical School. And Ju-sung Lee, Secretary General of the Korea NGO Council for Cooperation with North Korea. Please join me in a round of applause to welcome our moderator and presenters to the stage for session 2-1.
Well, welcome to the second day program of the Korea-Europe Peace Forum. And I'm Sang-hyun Lee, president of the Sejong Institute. Well, as introduced by moderator, this session will focus on how can we make a breakthrough to stall the relations with North Korea from academic, public health, and NGO perspectives. Well, as we all know that currently Korean peace process is under triple distress, I think. US-DPRK negotiation has been completely stopped since the Hanoi summit. And also North-South Korea dialogue has been completely stopped either. And it is also worsened by North Korea's voluntary isolation because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it seems to me right now, Korean peace process and the inter-Korean relations has been quite in difficult condition. And even worse is that recently North Korea officially declared that their nuclear doctrine law. So saying that if North Korean leadership is under attack, their military will automatically start using nuclear weapon. So having said that, how can we make a breakthrough in this situation? Well, as you know, government-to-government contact or international engagement is quite difficult these days. So given that perhaps NGO and academic and humanitarian steps may be the only remaining avenue to engage in North Korea. So because of that, we have three very excellent panelists who can answer our curiosity from academic, NGO, and humanitarian perspective. And I look at the presentation material briefly, and it seems to me I expect a lot of questions from the floor. So I would like to urge each presenter to limit their presentation in 15 minutes to the maximum. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Nam Sun-song. How do you see inter-Korean engagement of North Korea from academic perspective? 15 minutes, please.
Thank you, President Lee Sang-hyun, for your introduction. I'd like to thank Professor Moon Jong-in and Sejong Institute, as well as Free Universities of Berlin, who organized this conference. Let me start my presentation with a brief introduction of ISKS engagement with North Korea. And I would also like to address the post-pandemic prospects, as well as the feasibility of the inter-Korean academic dialogues. And finally, I will focus on how the inter-Korean academic dialogues can be improved to advance the current stalled inter-Korean relations. The ISKS is an academic network, international network for Korean studies. The ISKS has attempted to promote Korean studies through enhancement of a holistic understanding of Korea. This mission constantly required the ISKS to be interdisciplinary in its academic approaches, and also to be peninsula-wide and beyond in its membership. It's constantly meant that the engagement with North Korea is one of its priorities. Our attempt to provide scholars from the North and South with opportunities to meet and understand each other have been rather successful. Since 1990, of the 15 conferences the ISKS has hosted, 12 of them each had 10 to 30 participants from the North, as well as 100 to 200 participants from the South. The last conference was held in August this year. The conference was held in a hybrid format, both in person and also online. To prepare the conference, we held an online meeting in December last year. We invited representatives from each ISKS branch. Those from Pyongyang attended the meeting online via Zoom. And they proposed to make 20 online presentations at the conference. We said, okay, go ahead. Then a long period of silence came, and communication stopped until July, a month prior to the conference. North Korean participation in the conference ended up with the paper-based submissions. They sent us 20 papers with an apology for the 6-month silence, and also for not being able to participate proactively in the online conference. During the halt of communication with Pyongyang, we assumed there would be two reasons. One possible reason was the upcoming South Korean presidential election. All sort of contacts with the South may have been deterred by the authorities until the result comes out. The other possible reason was the state of emergency for quarantine declared in Pyongyang. Both factors may have affected the situation, but I think that the latter, the second one, was dominant when we consider the North Korean assurance that they would join the ISK's activities as soon as the COVID-19 pandemic terminated. That was despite the South Korean presidential election, to which they were obviously not very much partial. That was good news. The ISKS has encouraged scholars from both Koreas not only to meet, but to conduct some collaborative work in different fields. A small workshops and symposiums have been organized where the experts from both Koreas can talk about specific topics. This has included the exploration of solutions to the disparities in the writing systems and the lexicon between the North and South, comparison between the North and South performance arts, and peace building on the peninsula, and so on. Currently, two joint research projects, Arirang and the unification of scientific and technical terminology are in progress. Unfortunately, many other projects of ISKS have been halted or suspended by the attitudes and the policies taken by the governments. South Korean government has historically taken an initiative in the inter-Korean academic dialogues as well as political ones, but with a lack of consistency. Well, for instance, the support and collaboration from the South drastically declined in 2008, and it was not fully recovered until 2017. This active inconsistency is risky since it may end up with a loss of trust that has repeatedly seen at every regime change in the South. The trust building had to be resumed each time from zero, or even sometimes from a negative point. North Korea, on the other hand, has been relatively consistent as far as the inter-Korean academic dialogues. They have constantly responded and accepted our proposals, although very cautiously and slowly. They have seldom shown up with their own proposals or plans. This passive consistency is not reliable either, since it may lead to losing opportunities, good opportunities, as we have seen over the last decade. The bold plan. So, then where is a breakthrough possible? The bold plan that has been proposed recently by the South Korean authorities means that if North Korea should take an evident and substantial step toward denuclearization, then North Korea would gain sufficient agent support from the South. This is nothing more than a proposal to trade their security, North Korean security, with their economic benefits. I wonder if it would work. Since North Korean development of nuclear arsenals has not proposed, not for their economic benefits, but for their regime security. So when some important personnel in Pyongyang says, how dare you trade your own destiny with some pieces of corn cake, I think it may make a sense. The mutual trust between the North and South has been so severely undermined that this kind of trading framework can hardly work or falls short. Given the current political climate on the peninsula, the restoration of inter-Korean relations in the traditional frameworks can hardly work. When distrust prevails, any promises of aid and support do not sound very much meaningful. To improve the current situations on the peninsula, I think we should stop such naive, they quote, questions as, should we trust them? Will they attack us? Or can we overwhelm them? Contemplating such questions is no closer than finding an answer than asking the simplest and fundamental question, who are you? Instead, we should be focusing on more inclusive, we quote questions as, who are we? Can we survive without each other? Or what can be achieved if we work together? I think we should list up what is needed to be done for the peninsula-wide interests. Then we may find our lists almost open-ended. Ariran, for instance, is the most symbolic folk song that makes Korean people feel oneness. I think we should know, we should share the common knowledge and understanding of how this cultural heritage was generated and how it became so deeply implanted in the minds of Korean people. 교래말태사전, the great dictionary of national language, should be completed at any cost when we consider the interest of the whole nation. The North and South should share the common scientific and technical terminology. Yes, of course. Can either the North or the South, standing alone, can cope with another pandemic without sharing expertise? According to the World Inequality Report 2002, the richest 10% of the world population emits 47.6% of the global CO2 emissions, while those in the lower 50% income brackets emit only 12%. It means that the wealthy and the middle class in developed countries enjoy their urban lives while natural disasters jeopardize the poor's existence in developing countries. This is not inferring that the increasing natural disasters in the South, in the North, have been caused by the South, but it is to reinforce the concept that solutions should be brought about only through the joint efforts. Possibly, only after considering all these questions would we allow ourselves to go back to the first fundamental question, who are you? Then our answer could be quite different. Whenever confronted with the question, how do you engage North Koreans? I would say we should get engaged in North Korea first. Talking about peace and collaboration on the peninsula in North Koreans' absence, does it make a sense? Of course, yes, it does, as we are involved in it right now. But in most cases, it would be more productive and substantial to engage North Koreans. The former may be taking an easy path to reach nowhere, while the latter could be getting off a beaten path to make a small yet a certain step. Thus, we should create new discourses that are distinctive from the currently prevailing ones, built around preemptive attacks, retaliation, and annihilation. Let me talk about my history of failures. The ISKS attempted the large-scale North-South academic exchange on 3 occasions. In 2002, the ISKS hosted the first World Congress for Korean Studies in collaboration with the Academy of Korean Studies in Seoul. We requested the North Korean authorities to send a group of academics to Seoul. Pyongyang's response was positive, very good. By April 2002, they were completely ready to send a delegation of about 50 academics to Seoul. Then the Second Battle of Yeonpyeong broke out. Pyongyang subsequently announced its cancellation of this dispatch. The second attempt came in 2004, 2 years later. The ISKS organized the 7th International Conference in Pyongyang. Pyongyang was ready to welcome about 200 academics from the South. Then, only 2 weeks prior to the conference date, the North Korean organization committee suddenly declared that they would not accept any South Korean participants. This refusal of South Koreans was declared as a counteraction to the South Korean government's decision that banned South Korean condolence group from visiting Pyongyang on the 10th anniversary of President Kim Il-sung's passing away. The third attempt was made in 2019 at the Prague conference. All the participants unanimously agreed to hold the next conference in Pyongyang in 2021. The Pyongyang branch welcomed this agreement, but the COVID-19 deterred our third attempt. Okay, that's the history. Now, talking about the fourth attempt, it is getting harder and harder to make people trust me. But let me say this. The government sectors, along with non-government sectors, should explore the question how to minimize the risks of the accidental political conflicts that undermines the sustainability of civil exchanges, not until the day that the civil exchanges become substantially independent of politics or political fortunes, cannot say that the peace building on the peninsula is secure. Our fourth attempt is actually coming soon, sometime in 2024. Hopefully, that will allow us to see what may be possible in the quite unforeseeable future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Well, Professor Song emphasized the public-private partnership to reduce political risk in academic exchange between two Koreas. Thank you for that. Kibom, could you talk your experience as a medical surgeon? How do you see the prospect of engagement in North Korea in your perspective?
So do you want me to present now? Yeah, great. Well, first, let me thank you, President Lee, and also Chairman Moon, Sejong Institute, and all the staff, the Freedom Peace Forum staff that have worked excellently for this conference. My contribution to this important discussion is to how to make a breakthrough in the stalled relations with North Korea, specifically in the public health space. It's my opinion that it's never been a better time post-pandemic to engage North Korea in health cooperation. A little bit about myself. I'm a neurosurgeon. Let me just go ahead with the slides here. I'm a neurosurgeon. I've worked alongside North Korean neurosurgeons since 2007. This is a picture from September of 2007 at the Pyongyang Medical Conference. To my left is a neurosurgeon from the Red Cross Hospital in Pyongyang, and then to my left are two neurosurgeons from South Korea, from Ulchi University. Since then, I've made over 20 trips to North Korea. I'm also trained in public health and began examining the factors that influence health of North Korean people since 2016. It's not just medical care that determines the health of North Korean people. There are socioeconomic factors and significant geopolitical factors, such as sanctions and failure to achieve peace. So my public health engagement has opened opportunities for me to engage in dialogue on health matters with policymakers in the North, South, and also US and the WHO. Let me start my presentation by categorically stating that the North Korean government takes the health of their people very seriously. One indication of this is that they spend up to 6 to 7% of their GDP on health. I think what's more important is that during the last 10, 12 years of their military escalation with the nuclear and ballistic missile programs, the healthcare spending has been sustained. We also know recently that they've been buying millions of dollars worth of ventilators, medicines, and other medical equipment from China as recently as August and July of this summer. Now, during my last trip to Pyongyang in November 2019, the North Korean doctors proudly showed me these the upgrades that they have made in their health system. The picture on the left, upper left, is the operating rooms at the Pyongyang Medical College Teaching Hospital. They've upgraded all the doors to electronic doors. The picture in the middle is a CT scanner that they have developed at Kimchek University. It's functional. It's a prototype only for head. I've seen the image qualities from this CAT scanner. It's quite good. What's more surprising to me is that the cost of development of this CT scanner was $20,000 US, and I think it has huge implications in global health. The picture on the right is an X-ray of an artificial knee joint that was developed, manufactured, and is being used for North Korean people for people with bad knees. And I'm a neurosurgeon, and the picture on the lower part is a screw. And what does a screw have to do with it? Anything? I specialize in spine reconstruction after injuries, and we had to bring implants from outside for years to treat these. And the last trip I was there, they proudly showed me. They said, "박기범 선생, 이것 좀 봐요." And they had made their own screw set, and it's actually quite good. And it just goes to show you their will to continue to take care of the health of their people and do it on their own strength. So during the other thing I want to mention is that North Korea actively participates as a member of WHO. So in 2015, there was a resolution at the World Health Assembly in Geneva. It was co-sponsored by the United States, and the resolution called for strengthening surgical care as part of universal health coverage. At that time, North Korea was a member of the executive board of WHO, and during the comments and debates, the U.S. got up and said why this is an important thing for health, and the North Koreans got up and said the exact same thing. And you know, it was a rare moment to see the U.S. and North Korea on the same page. And so I think in the health space, you can get some cooperation. This is a picture of me with the North Korean ambassador and the health attaché in the Geneva mission with the WHO official. So one of the requirements of the resolution was for member states to start adding within their health strategic plan components of surgical care. And North Korea actually followed through with that. This is their medium-term strategic plan for health sector 2016-2020, and they went ahead and put that in there. And I can't say that for all the other countries, but North Korea did do that. The problem remains, as you know, the geopolitical factors, which include sanctions, which have been increasing over time, and a nationwide project to increase surgical care services, especially at the district level hospital, is a very challenging project in the North Korea context, and it would be very costly. I work with a number of other countries in scaling up surgical care. It's in the ballpark of 500 million for Zambia, 800 million for Tanzania, over $1 billion for Nigeria. I assume for some place like North Korea, a rough estimate would be about $500 million. So how does a project like that even start in North Korea in the backdrop of tightening sanctions? So our lab, we performed a report with Ramon Pacheco Pardo, and we looked at the injury burden in North Korea. And we showed that there's a cost to not addressing the injury burden in terms of human lives lost, human capital, of about $1.5 billion. And then we went with this report to the U.S. Side, who, as most of you know, control the gates to the sanctions exemption. And we said, I think North Korea is really interested in a large-scale surgical system strengthening project, but the sanctions are in the way. And one of the things that they just weren't at that time, 2018, allowing anything beyond medications and food. And we had known, so the U.S. response initially was a large health development project. This is obviously pre-COVID, is not going to happen. But we presented an intriguing option, which was, what if North Korea is willing to co-finance up to 20%, let's say, of the entire cost of the project? And that created a different calculus for the Americans, where they saw that this is a good way for the North Koreans to spend money and then do it in a way that's helpful for the population of North Korea. And they went ahead and said, I think it will be possible to allow this project to proceed province by province. So start with one province. And they will be willing to at least look at the sanctions part of it. So we went on a diplomacy campaign. I met with people at the WHO. I was in Pyongyang a number of times, and then ultimately was assured that they would provide up to 20% of co-financing for a project. So a pilot project was proposed by the South Korean Ministry of Unification, actually, and they went ahead and agreed to give $5 million to WHO, and the North Koreans signed on that project, and this was at the end of 2019. We all know that the pandemic started in 2020, and the project has been on hold, but the idea is to do a pilot project in a single province to strengthen pediatric surgical care, and then also include a nationwide assessment, and then come up with a budget for the nationwide project. So what happened with COVID? We all know that North Korea relied on a zero COVID strategy, which worked very well for a long time. This was based on their previous experience with SARS and MERS and Ebola. And they were successful until the Omicron virus, the variant, came out, and it clearly failed. And they had a massive outbreak in May of this year. Now, I think it took the North Koreans by surprise, and also it took the people like me by surprise by how little, in terms of human cost, that the outbreak caused. I think their estimates or their official reports are in the 70s number of people who died from this the outbreak. We're not sure. I'll be honest with you. It's not clear exactly what that number is. But what I think is clear is that it didn't cause the devastation and the massive death toll that they were expecting, because they started to relax some of their public health measures fairly quickly. But the truth is the pandemic is still ongoing. The population of North Korea still remains unvaccinated. And North Korea knows that their zero COVID strategy is now flawed. So they're trying to concurrently strengthen their medical countermeasures by importing, as I mentioned earlier, ventilators, medicines, and other medical supplies from China in the tunes of millions of dollars. This is in the backdrop of the absence or near absence of humanitarian aid programming by international agencies and NGOs. Those have all pretty much stopped since the pandemic. And then North Korea has declined offers of vaccines and other assistance from US, South Korea, and even COVAX. But my opinion is that they will accept assistance, but it has to be done in their terms, and that's the key. The devil's in the details. As I mentioned earlier, North Korea participates in WHO regional mechanisms, and they've been attending meetings by Zoom. This is the Southeast Asia Regional Office where North Korea is a member. Most recently, just about a month ago, I think, they had a regional committee meeting in Bhutan, and there the North Koreans attended in person. So I actually looked at the picture and said, they're there, but it wasn't the new health minister. It was actually the ambassador to India who flew over to Bhutan to represent North Korea. But what's important, I think, is to know that they are actively engaged and they want to be part of the WHO mechanism. And I think they're interested in three things in terms of health cooperation. One is health system strengthening. They know that their health system has infrastructural problems, staff problems, and supplies. Second is epidemiological capacity building. We saw from the outbreak that the things that they were reporting were very rudimentary, and they know that. And I think they want to upgrade their ability to detect and surveil pandemics. And third, I think they want development assistance in terms of health, specifically vaccine manufacturing and development capabilities. So I'm going to move a little bit now on to sort of what can we do about it. I drew this out to get an idea of if there's an interest in engaging with North Korea on health, let's go ahead and if we can all agree on that, and we need to do that, and North Korea is interested, we need to figure out how has it been done in the past, right? So how do we improve it? And I can tell you that, and I think a lot of people sitting here can vouch for this, that health humanitarian aid to North Korea has been poorly coordinated, it's been fragmented, and it's intermittent and subject to political whims, both on the outside actors, U.S. and the South Koreans, but also on the North Korea side. And so, how do we agree to cooperate in this current situation? And who are the main actors in this space? And right now, really, China is the main actor in terms of providing assistance. And they don't participate in multilateral mechanisms. U.S., even though they don't provide assistance, they're the main gatekeeper and deniers of assistance to North Korea. But there are other actors like EU. Scandinavian countries have always been a steadfast donor to at least humanitarian assistance to North Korea. And I think, Gyeonggi province even was an actor at one point. They were providing assistance to North Korea for mosquito controls and things like that. And of course, you have ROK, which I think they have massive resources, but I think it has not been able to realize the full potential of their resources for mainly political reasons. So here's the money shot. What do we do? So I'm recommending a comprehensive and strategic approach to health aid and do it in a coordinated way. So what does a comprehensive aid package look like? First of all, COVID assistance, testing kits, test machines, medicines, ventilators, but also materials and trainings and resources to strengthen health systems throughout the entire country. This is a massive project, over $1 billion is my estimation. Then you have things like development assistance in vaccine technology. And then within this package should be embedded humanitarian assistance. Most of you know humanitarian assistance is provided by UNDP, UN agencies, along with some NGOs. And every year they put out an appeal for $120 million for food aid and health aid and clean water. The funding is intermittent, and it's actually right now funded at about $20 to $25 million a year. Clearly not the actual ask that they're asking for of $120 million. What if we can guarantee 5 years of sustained humanitarian assistance, $120 million a year, uninterrupted, which is much more efficient and impactful way to deliver assistance. And you put this entire package and put a price tag on it. It's not cheap. It's about $2 billion in my estimation. But what if we take a $2 billion commitment and then enact it over a 5-year period, right? A sustained 5-year period, and through a mechanism that's coordinated. And then I think the outputs are, in my opinion, the expected outcomes are the following. One is we will see an improvement of the health of North Korean people. For me, as a doctor, that's the most important outcome. But the other outcome, I think, is we can build trust. And there's a massive trust deficit. And Professor Son talked about it. But the trust is the essential ingredient that is missing for diplomacy right now. So we think trust building can lead to diplomacy. And then last one is a sustained communication mechanism. So I think this is a good way to do it. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. Let's go big, and let's go big or go home, right? And then who are the main funders of this? Of course, ROK, as I mentioned, it has the most amount of resources and interest in this area. How it can be done, it remains to be seen. Most likely, as I mentioned here, it should be channeled through the international organizations like the UN. The project I mentioned through WHO, the $5 million, it was ROK money. North Korea knew that, but it was a WHO project, and they're okay with that. So I think there are different places to raise money and then pool it and channel it. And then I think, once again, this is a situation where maybe even local governments like Gyeonggi province could play a role. And also I would say that private philanthropy is also an option. And who would implement it? I think that this will have to be done by UN just because of it's a massive project. But NGOs will play a major part in it. The key here is that both IO, international organizations, and NGOs follow the same strategic plan and coordinate. And there may be others as well. So I will close by saying that there's never been a better time post-pandemic for health cooperation with North Korea. The time is now, and I hope we can act on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kim. It's quite interesting. Perhaps I would say that because of the pandemic, we are now facing new opportunity to engage in North Korea. We will talk a little more later. Okay, next presenter is Secretary General Lee Ju-sung. 15 minutes, please.
네, 안녕하십니까. 대북협력민간단체협의회 사무총장 이주성입니다. 코리아 유럽 피스 포럼 상당히 중요한 모임을 계획하셨고 진행하신다라는 생각이 듭니다. 저희 민간에서도 여러 가지 고민들 가운데에 유럽과의 연대가 가장 중요하다라고 하는 판단들을 가지고 있었었는데 세종연구소가 먼저 이것들을 기획해 주시고 저희들과 함께 연대할 수 있는 기회를 주셔서 진심으로 감사드립니다. 첫 시작이지만 이것이 마지막이어서는 안 됩니다. 같이 가야 하고요. 오래 가야 합니다. 북에 있는 친구들은 우리랑 협력하는 것을 지금 원치 않아 보이지만 우리가 기다려주기를, 우리가 준비해주기를 기대하지 않을까라는 생각이 있습니다. 그것을 위한 우리의 모임이 이제 시작되어진 것은 상당히 축하할 일이고 기대할 일이다라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 대북협력민간단체협의회는 남쪽의 민간들의 같이 모여서 정보를 공유하고 사업을 연대하고 그다음에 국민적 공감대와 정부와의 협력을, 그다음에 북과의 협상 가운데에서 저희의 일관된 목소리를 내는 창구로서 활용되어 왔습니다. 1999년에 북민협이 같이 모였고 지금은 저희가 65개 단체가 같이 연대하고 있습니다. 남쪽의 민간이 대북 사업을 하려면 하고 싶어서 할 수 있지 않습니다. 정부로부터 승인받은 단체에 한해서만 대북 사업을 할 수가 있습니다. 정부로부터 승인받은 민간 단체는 150개 단체입니다. 그중에 65개 단체가 저희와 연대하고 있는데요. 현재 150개 단체가 다 활발하게 움직이고 있지는 못합니다. 한 반 이상은 유명무실한 상황에서 65개 단체라고 한다면 대부분 나름 대북 인도적 지원 사업 하는 단체들은 대부분이 참여하고 있다라고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 또한 북민협은 정부와의 협상, 그다음에 정책을 협의하는 창구이기도 합니다. 그래서 민관 정책협의회를 저희가 운영하고 있습니다. 저희가 1년에 2번 모이게 되어지는데 통일부 차관과 저희 대북협력민간단체협의회 회장이 공동의장으로 민간의 의견이 반영되어지는 정책 수립을 추진하고 있고, 이것을 실행하는 과정 중에 실무 책임자들과 정부의 실무자들이 모여서 계속적인 논의를 진행하고 있습니다. 북한과의 협상도 저희가 북민협이 직접 할 때가 있습니다. 개별 단체들이 사업을 추진하는 가운데 어려움이 처할 때는 북민협이 회원단체로부터 권한을 위임받아서 북측과 협의하게 되어집니다. 그래서 상당히 2018년도에는 많은 어려움이 있었지만 북측과 합의를 통해서 회원단체들이 특별회비, 사업비를 모아서 북에 식량을 지원하면서 북과의 협력 사업을 추진한 바가 있음을 말씀을 드립니다. 저 개인적으로는 월드비전에서 27년 근무했습니다. 그리고 대북 사업을 20년을 했습니다. 앞에서 발제자 분들께서 말씀하셨던 경험 또한 저도 있어서 충분히 공감하고 과거의 기억들이 새록새록 납니다. 2001년부터 2015년까지 매년 남과 북의 농학자들이 모여서 세미나를 했습니다. 제3국에서 한 번, 평양에서 한 번, 그렇게 주관하면서 사업을 진행했던 경험이 있었고요. 남쪽의 학자들이 한 번은 40명, 북에서도 40명 정도가 모여서 7, 80명 이상의 학자들이 모여서 세미나를 매년 개최했다라고 하는 것은 저희들한테 참 흥미로운 일이었습니다. 좀 더 흥미로운 일이 있다면 북측 학자들과 8년을 같이 먹고 자고 하면서 그들 역량 강화를 했다라고 하는 겁니다. 한 번 남은 2년 동안 저희랑 같이 먹고 자고 했고요. 그것을 4팀이 나왔습니다. 그것이 8년 동안 진행되어졌던 경험도 있습니다. 북에서 그런 것들이 가능할 수 있었던 것은 그들이 필요한 것이 무엇인지, 그리고 그것을 어떤 방식으로 진행하는지가 되게 중요했던 것 같습니다. 그것은 신뢰를 기반하지 않았는가라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 그리고 또 특별한 경험이 있다면, 많은 사람들이 이 사업에 참여했지만 그 과정 중에 저는 북측의 종자를 지원하게 됐습니다. 가장 그들이 필요한 종자였습니다. 북에서도 그것이 필요했고 저희들은 그것을 가지고 있었습니다. 그러나 그것을 줄 때에 무상으로 주지 않았습니다. 그렇다고 해서 돈을 받은 것은 아닙니다. 그들에게 종자를 주면서 그들이 갖고 있는 종자와 교환하자라고 제안했고, 북에서 그것을 승인합니다. 동의합니다. 그래서 개성에서 우리가 가져가는 종자와 북측에서 갖고 있던 종자, 재래종, 원종을 상호 교환하면서 협력 사업에 대한 부분에 있어서 일방적이지 않았음을 보여주는 사례로 남고 있다라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 그런 경험이 저한테 있기 때문에 그런 방식의 협력이 우리 안에서 가능할까를 볼 때 남쪽의 많은 민간이 사실은 그런 형식의 사업을 추진하고 있었다 라고 하는 말씀을 드립니다. 그것이 잘 알려지지 않았습니다. 알려지지 않은 것은 북의 입장이 있었기 때문이기도 합니다. 그리고 남쪽 정부에서도 때로는 이 사업과 관련한 부분에 있어서 부정적으로 볼 때에도 흔쾌하게 허락하지 않을 때도 있었기 때문에 민간에서 그것을 다 오픈하지 못했던 경우가 있었음을 말씀을 드립니다. 이제는 그런 경험들이 국제사회와 나누어져야 한다라는 생각이 듭니다. 유럽에서도 많은 민간과 시민사회가 북쪽을 향한 마음을 가지고 인도적 지원을 계획했고 실행해봤던 경험들을 갖고 있을 것이라 생각합니다. 그 경험들을 나눠야 합니다. 그리고 더 필요한 북의 니즈가 무엇인지, 우리가 효과적으로 사업할 수 있고 성공 사례가 무엇인지, 우리가 조심해야 될 것은 무엇인지, 그리고 우리가 어떤 방식으로 협력할 것인지에 대한 고민을 진지하게 나눠야 하겠다라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 한국 민간이 갖고 있는 인도적 지원에 대한 개선 되게 중요한 목표입니다. 그것을 위해서 저희들은 연대하고 있고 협력하고 있습니다. 그런데 한국 민간은 원튼 원치 않든 또 하나의 목적이 있습니다. 그것은 한반도의 평화입니다. 인도적 지원 그 자체로서도 엄청난 효과가 있는데 그 과정에서 한반도의 평화를 견인해 나갈 수 있다. 그 견인을 위해서라도 교류협력, 인도적 지원은 지속되어져야 한다라고 하는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 그동안 남쪽 민간이 북쪽의 인도적 지원 사업을 했던 그 규모를 보면 1995년서부터 2021년까지 한 9,800억 정도 저희가 민간에서 지원한 것으로 보여집니다. 근데 금액이 중요한 것이 아니라 그 정부 남북 관계 정치적 군사적인 충돌이 있을 땐 교류 협력이 중단되어지거나 보류되어집니다. 경색되어진 남북 관계로 인해서 교류 협력이 중단되어지든 교류 협력이 중단되어졌기 때문에 정치 군사적인 경색 국면으로 돌입했든 저희가 남북 간의 교류 협력이 중단되어졌다라고 하는 것은 평화가 상당히 위협받고 있다라고 하는 하나의 지표로 볼 수 있겠습니다. 그런 측면에서 2000년, 2001년 그리고 오늘 이 순간까지 남쪽의 민간의 활동가들이 북한 현장을 방문한 경험이 한 번도 없었습니다. 물론 북에 코로나가 있기 때문에 불가능할 수 있었지만 코로나가 없다고 해서 저희가 과연 갈 수 있었을까에 대한 의문이 있습니다. 그런 측면에서 남북 간의 정치적 군사적 문제로 인해서 경색되어지는 부분, 그 부분에 있어서 평화가 위협받는 것을 그나마라도 보정하고 그것을 평화를 계속해 유지할 수 있는 기초를 다질 수 있는 것은 지속적인 교류 협력이다 라고 하는 생각은 저희 민간들이 가지고 있습니다. 근데 북이 지금 남쪽 정부, 남쪽 민간과 관계를 맺고 있지 않습니다. 그렇다고 해서 저희들이 아무것도 지금 상황에서는 저희들의 고민이 그렇습니다. 유엔 제재가 있습니다. 유엔 제재가 가장 큰 제재, 가장 큰 넘어야 될 산이라고 생각했던 과거의 경험이 있는데 유엔 제재를 넘다 보니 더 큰 산이 있었습니다. 미국의 대북 제재였습니다. 그래서 미국의 대북 제재를 좀 더 넘어 보니까 더 큰 제재가 있는 겁니다. 북한의 셀프 제재입니다. 우리가 주겠다고 하는데 안 받겠다고 하는 그들의 입장에서 저희들이 더 이상 할 수 있는 것이 없었습니다. 근데 그들이 필요가 있는 것 같습니다. 그 필요라고 하는 부분은 어제 미국 농무성이 발표한 국제 식량 안보 그 보고서를 보게 되어지면 북한의 식량이 올해 150만 톤이 부족할 거라고 이야기합니다. 거의 북한 주민의 70% 이상이 70% 정도가 식량의 부족함으로 올해를 살아가야 된다라고 하는 겁니다. 작년에 82만 톤이었습니다. 거의 2배 가까이 그들에게 식량 위기가 있다라는 것이 미국 농무부의 발표입니다. 인도적 상황이 계속해서 악화되어지고 있는 거죠. 협력의 필요성이 있습니다. 정치 구사적 문제 없이 인류 보편적 가치를 실현해야만 되는 것이 저희의 중차에 대한 과제입니다. 남쪽 민간은 지금 많은 어려움에 봉착해 있습니다. 그렇다면 북이 수용 가능하고 유연하게 대처할 수 있는 유럽과의 연대, 유럽 민간 단체들과 연대는 우리가 이것을 돌파할 수 있는 하나의 좋은 기회가 될 수 있겠다라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 그런 측면에서 이 포럼이 저희에게 주는 의미는 적지 않다라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 저희 민간 단체들은 남쪽의 민간 단체들은 긴국고를 시작해서요, 농축산, 그다음에 보건의료복지, 환경, 산림 여러 측면에서의 북과의 협력 사업을 추진하고 있습니다만 아까 말씀드린 대로 2019년 2월 하노이 회담 이후에 북쪽이 남쪽에 대한 태도가 변하면서 남쪽 민간과의 협력도 중단하게 되었다라고 하는 말씀을 드립니다. 저희 개인적인 생각입니다만 가장 좋은 기회가 2018년도에 대한민국에 있었습니다. 그 기회를 살리지 못한 것이 지금도 많이 아쉬움이 있습니다. 그 여러 가지 기회 중에 하나가 뭐였냐면 정상 간의 탑다운식이 합의되어지는 그 과정 중에 민간의 역할이 없었다라는 겁니다. 과거에는 정부 간의 경색된 국면에서도 민간의 교류 협력을 통해서 일정 부분 그 보완책이 있었는데 지금은 정부가 탑다운식으로 되어졌던 이 협상 과정에서 민간의 역할, 민간의 동력이 사라지면서 그것을 견인해갈 수 있는 모든 민간의 그 지금까지 했던 역할이 상실되어졌다라고 볼 수밖에 없는 그런 측면에서 가장 아쉬운 부분이다라고 하는 말씀을 드립니다. 최근 인도적 지원에 대한 북의 태도는 분명합니다. 2005년에도 국제사회의 인도적 지원 사업을 계속 더 이상 받지 않겠다, 개발 협력으로 전환하자라고 얘기했던 이야기가 있었고, 그럼에도 불구하고 저희가 지속할 수 있었던 것은 북의 인도적 상황이 개선되어지는 것이 눈에 띄게 보여지지 않았기 때문에 계속해서 인도적 지원 사업이 진행이 됐었는데요. 2014년, 15년에 북에서 남쪽 민간에게 팩스를 보냅니다. 인도적 지원 사업을 더 이상 하지 않겠다. 그러나 경제 협력을 염두에 둔 개발 협력 사업으로의 전환을 하자. 그러면서 또 하나의 제안을 합니다. 북쪽이 현재 갖고 있는 인도적 지원 상황에 대해서 남쪽이 그동안 협력했던 것이 얼마큼 성과가 있는지를 직접 보고 평가하고 향후 장기적인 협력의 방식을 논의하자라고 하는 제안이 있었습니다. 그래서 남쪽 민간들이 각 단체의 대표들이 평양을 방문해서 그동안의 성과를 보고 그거에 대한 논의한 틀을 가지려고 준비했고, 북에서도 초청장이 왔는데 실행되지 못했습니다. 그것이 이제 비행기 타기 며칠 전에 북에서 여러 가지 사정상 좀 뒤로 연기하자라고 하는 상황 때문에 2015년에 실행하려고 했던 것들이 이루어지지 못했다라고 하는 아쉬움이 없지 않아 있음을 말씀을 드립니다. 그 과정 중에 북과 협의하는 과정 중에 북이 얘기했던 것은 그겁니다. 인도적 지원, 일방적인 지원을 받는 것은 저희 하기가 곤란하다. 이만큼 과거 같지 않다. 고난의 행군 시기로 자기는 인식하지 말아달라. 이제는 남쪽도 이익이 되는 사업을 같이 하자. 이것이 상호호혜와 공리공영의 원칙에 의거한 상호 윈윈 되는 사업을 하자라는 것이 북의 입장이었습니다. 저는 개인적으로 거기에 경험이 있습니다. 북쪽 친구들과 이야기하는데 북쪽 친구들이 저희가 북한 아이들 돕기 위해서 비스켓을 만들겠다라고 얘기했더니 북한 친구들이 그 비스켓을 만든다면 남쪽 민간에는 어떤 도움이 되느냐? 우리는 우리의 목적 사업을 하는 거다. 그거 말고 경제적인 이익이 뭐냐? 라고 하는 이야기를 합니다. 그러면서 북 친구들이 한참을 고민하더니 역제안을 합니다. 그 역제안은 이런 겁니다. 비스켓을 만들어서 반은 남쪽에서 가져가서 아프리카라든가 더 어려운 나라를 당신들 사업하고 있지 않냐, 그 나라에 주고 반은 우리가 먹겠다. 우리 아이들을 주겠다. 그러면 남쪽 민간이 다른 데서 물건을 사갖고 가야 되는데 저렴하게 만들어서 더 어려운 나라를 도울 수 있는 목적 사업을 실행할 수 있지 않겠습니까? 그런 식의 협력으로 상호 윈윈하는 사업을 하자라는 게 북의 입장이었습니다. 그리고 2018년도에 양국 최고위급 회담에서도 합의서에 상호호혜와 공리공영의 원칙을 분명히 하는 것을 저희들이 확인했습니다. 이것이 지금 당장 실현 가능한지는 고민할 수밖에 없고 고개를 갸우뚱할 수밖에 없지만 장기적으로 상호호혜와 공리공영의 원칙이 우리 안에 준용되어질 수 있는 프로젝트들을 우리가 고민해야 될 필요는 분명히 있겠다 라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 그리고 북은 또 하나를 요청하는 게 있습니다. 역량 강화입니다. 앞에 두 분이 다 발제자님께서 역량 강화를 되게 중요시 여기셨습니다. 제 경험에 매년 15년을 매년 남북 농학자들이 모여서 심포지엄을 할 수 있었던 것은 지식 공유 사업이었기 때문에 가능했던 거고요. 8년을 남쪽 학자, 북측 농학자들이 같이 먹고 자고 하면서 이 친구들에게 교육하고 또 그 친구들의 경험을 나눌 수 있는 교류의 현장이 만들어질 수 있었던 것도 지식 공유 때문에 가능한 겁니다. 또 하나가 있습니다. 대북 제재에 물자가 들어가는 것은 되게 어려운데 이 지식 공유 역량 강화는 그나마 저희가 유연하게 사업 프로젝트를 진행할 수 있겠다라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 그런 측면에서 저희가 그들과 함께 나눌 수 있는 역량 강화의 분야, 그다음 방식을 깊게 고민해야 될 필요가 있지 않을까라는 생각을 갖게 되어집니다. 한 번은 천주교 쪽에서 저한테 어느 종교단체인데 천주교죠. 그러니까 천주교가 저한테 제안을 합니다. 천주교에서 할 수 있는 사업이 어떤 사업이 있겠는가라는 제안을 해서 전 세계의 천주교의 정책성, 종교적 정체성을 갖고 있는 대학이 많은데 그 대학들마다 북한의 유학생들을 선발해서 그 학생들이 거기서 교육받을 수 있는 프로그램을 한다면 어떨까? 그랬더니 그것이 충분히 가능하다라고 하는 얘기를 하시더라고요. 저는 유럽과 코리아와 유럽이 같이 모여서 북한에 우리가 어떤 사업을 제안할까를 고민할 때 각 분야별, 박기 선생님께서는 아까 보건의료 쪽 말씀하셨는데 농업, 보건의료, 그다음에 사회복지 각 분야별로 북한의 젊은 친구들을 공부할 수 있는 기회를 주고 그들을 뒷받침하는 것을 같이 연대해 보는 건 어떨까? 라는 생각을 좀 갖게 되어집니다. 실질적인 효과가 저는 있을 거라고 생각을 합니다. 물론 북의 협조가 필요하겠지만 그런 측면에 있어서의 기회를 북에 계속 제안하는 것은 되게 좀 더 진일보한 제안이 아닐까라는 생각을 갖게 되어지고요. 두 번째는 박기 선생님 말씀하셨던 코로나와 관련되어진 건데 북에 기회를 줘야 되는데 많은 분들이 북한이 코로나에 대응하면서 바이러스를 박멸하고 방역에서 성공했다, 승리했다라고 하는 것을 선포할 때에 과학에서 불가능하다라고 이야기를 하는 분들이 있어요. 특히 사망자 수에 대해서는 믿을 수 없다, 과학이 그렇지 않다라고 하는 전문가들의 의견이 있습니다. 일정 부분 과학은 누가 되고 안 되고를 얘기할 수 있는 것은 아닙니다. 그러나 잠시 거둬두고 북한이 그렇게 성공했다면 저희가 궁금증을 가져야 하고요. 그 과정 중에 배울 것이 있다면 배워야 합니다. 그래서 그들에게 기회를 줘야 합니다. 그들에게 마이크를 줘야 합니다. 그리고 당신들이 성공했다고 하는 그 원인이 무엇이고 그 원인이 있다면 우리한테 얘기해달라. 우리도 그런 것에 참조하겠다. 그 당신들의 경험을 공유해달라라고 하는 자리를 만들어야 하는데 그것이 코리아 유럽 피스 포럼에서 한번 북에 제안해서 그 경험이 정말 특별하다, 그런 경험을 배우고 싶다라고 해서 존중하는 마음으로 그들 초대해보는 것은 어떨까? 라는 생각이 있습니다. 아니야, 틀렸어, 잘못됐어, 가공됐어, 거짓말이야 라고 하는 불신을 뒤에 접어두고 정말 궁금증을 가지고 배우겠다라고 하는 마음으로, 협력하자라고 하는 마음으로 그들과 가야 된다라고 하는 생각이 있고요. 두 번째, 북을 상대로 하면서 아까 개발 협력을 얘기했는데요. 우리가 무조건 줄 테니 니들은 받아라고 하는 형식은 아닌 것 같습니다. 그들도 충분히 우리에게 기여할 수 있는 여지가 있습니다. 그 기회를 줘야 하고 책임도 부여해야 합니다. 이게 역할 분담을 명확하게 해야 될 필요가 있다. 일방적이지 않아야 된다는 측면에서 협력 사업의 북의 역할을 명시하고 그들에게 그 책무성을 부여하는 협력의 방식으로 가야 되지 않을까라는 생각을 하게 되어집니다. 남쪽 민간은 계속해서 아까 말씀드렸던 이유들로 북과의 직접 사업을 고민하고 있고 실현해 가기 위한 노력을 경주할 겁니다. 그러나 그걸로만 기다리고 있지는 않을 겁니다. 다자 간의 협력이 우리 안에 또 하나의 방법일 수 있지 않을까를 고민하겠습니다. 그러면서 유럽 쪽 관계자들과 깊은 관계를 갖고 그 방법을 모색하는 것을 꾸준히 노력하겠다라고 하는 말씀을 드립니다. 이상입니다. 감사합니다.
Well, thank you very much. We had three very interesting and excellent presentation. This session has about 20 minutes. So, as a moderator, let me pose a quick question for each presenter. 우선 이주성 사무총장님, 지금 북한하고 협력하는데 제일 어려운 게 사실은 유엔이나 미국의 제재가 아니고 북한이 셀프 제재라고 그러셨잖아요. 그럼 이게 코로나 국면과 관련돼서 이 북한이 셀프 제재를 좀 완화시키려고 인게이지먼트로 나오려면 어떤 조건이 돼야 그게 가능하다고 보시는지요?
참 너무 쉽고도 너무 어려운 이야기인 것 같은데요. 일단 상호 간의 신뢰가 되게 중요할 것 같습니다. 북한은 이미 이 코로나의 원인이 남쪽으로부터 왔다라고 하는 이야기를 했습니다. 그건 불신의 이야기인 것 같습니다. 그리고 김여정은 본질적인 문제와 비본질적인 문제를 나눴습니다. 그런 측면에서 본질적인 문제는 정치군사적 문제고요. 비본질적인 문제가 인도적 지원이다라고 선을 확실하게 그었습니다. 이번에 담대한 구상 또한 마찬가지입니다. 아까 발제자께서 말씀하셨던 대로 이것이 과연 성공하겠느냐 참 어려움이 있습니다. 이유는 누가 담대해야 되는지 모르겠습니다. 조건부로 단계적으로 우리가 지원하면 단계적으로 북의 변화가 있으면 거기에 대응하는 협력을 하겠다, 인도적 지원을 하겠다라고 하는 측면이거든요. 그러면 북이 핵을 포기한다라고 해야 되는 건데 그것은 북이 엄청난 담대한 계획 구상 안에 담대한 행동을 해야 되는 거거든요. 그 담대한 구상의 핵심은 북이 되어 줄 수밖에 없습니다. 그것은 우리의 담대함이 아닌 거죠. 그런 측면에서 저는 참 어려운 이야기인데 한국 정부가 좀 더 진정성을 가지고서 북과 대화할 수 있어야 하고 그럴 측면에서 지금 여러 가지 제도적으로 막고 있고 실질적으로 실행 불가능한 여러 가지 상황들에 대해서 저는 핵과 연계하지 아니하고 모든 제도를 개선하고 그다음에 실질적인 실행 가능한 구도를 만들어 놔야 하지 않을까 그런 것들이 그 진정성이 저들에게 전달되어져야 되지 않겠느냐 하는 생각이 있고요. 미국입니다. 미국이 대북 제재와 관련한 부분에 있어서 북이 어떻든 관계없이 우리가 대북 제재에 있어서는 인도적 지원에 있어서는 적극 협조하겠다라고 하는 이야기를 해야 합니다. 그것이 또 담대한 겁니다. 미국 또한 담대하게 그것에 참여해야 합니다. 담대하다고는 얘기는 하지만 누구도 담대하지 않은 담대함. 그리고 그 담대함을 북한에게만 강요하는 듯한 느낌의 그런 식의 어떤 협력이 있다면 그것은 북이 어떤 식으로든 미국 특히 한국에 협력할 수 있게끔 도와달라고 협력하자라고 하는 이야기를 하기는 쉽지 않을 것이다. 그런 측면에서 군사적인 문제는 군사적 문제대로 비핵화는 되게 중요한 이슈이기에 그것은 포기할 수 없는 이슈이지만 더 중요한 건 그 다른 차원에서의 교류 협력 그거와 관계없이 담대하게 나가겠다라고 하는 것들을 하면 어떨까라는 생각을 좀 해봅니다. 부족한 것은 다른 분들이 또 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
예, 감사합니다. Okay, secondly, Kibum, you, according to your presentation, both in terms of act of power and fund capability, Korea's position is quite substantial. But why? But how can we utilize that potential to engage North Korea? For example, you mentioned that North Korea, even though when they accept the vaccination, probably they will do it in their own terms. So what do you think their terms, and how Korea can engage North Korea?
A great question. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the main actor is the U.S. If the U.S. Is willing to look at a robust health engagement with DPR Korea, whether directly, bilaterally, or even trilaterally, but most likely multilaterally, U.S. will have to sort of take the lead on this. But I think South Korea has an important role to play as a main ally in terms of supporting, opening up for resources, and being willing to do whatever it takes to support this strategy. I'm not sure right now that ROK could lead it politically. I don't think it's feasible, just because North Korea probably won't. Well, number one, South Korea doesn't control the sanctions regime and the banking channel issue. So it's really ultimately the U.S. side. But I think a kind of a back channel diplomacy supporting such an engagement to get that U.S. to take that next step would be very important. I just want to address that question you made to Director Lee about North Korea and COVID. If you look at North Korea's approach to COVID, it's rather draconian and extreme, and to me it indicates a level of fear, insecurity. And in order for them to reopen, I think it's important to reassure them, give them a sense of security. And how do you do that? Access to all the medical equipment that they may need, testing equipment to help figure out if they have variants, testing to see who's been infected, who has not been infected, so information, all those things that they can be used to feel more secure, and then I think that only then they'll start reopening.
Okay, thank you. Professor Song, you introduced the ISK's connection in North Korea, but you introduced your experience of the failure to engage North Korea in several occasions. So academic intertrade exchange, but sometimes it is failed by political or military factors. Then how can we separate those two areas, academic exchange and the risk of the political or military factor? So do you have any idea?
Thank you. Actually, honestly, I've got no ideas. It is extremely difficult and almost impossible. Civil exchanges are simply helpless, and people completely when it facing the political and accidental military conflicts. That's true, and there is no way be getting out of it. But despite of that, we still have a hope that over the repetitions of failures, there will be some more room where we can maintain it. And for example, North and South become a little more mature, and they understand how important it will be to maintain the minimum civil exchange connections when they were severely confronted right now, hoping that or anticipating that it will be restored. For example, after a year or after a couple of years from now. That's my hope.
Well, thank you. This panel has about 10 minutes left, so I would like to invite any question or comments from the floor. Yes. Please identify yourself first.
예, 경기도에서 일하고 있는 이규정 주무관이라고 합니다. 이번 그 행사는 경기도와 이제 여러 기관들이 같이 하고 있는데 그 연사분들께 공통적으로 질문드리고 싶습니다. 혹시 그 박기범 교수님께서는 경기도도 중요한 역할을 할 수 있다 이렇게 말씀을 해주셨고, 그 이주성 총장님께서도 이 유럽과의 협력이 어떤 돌파구가 될 수 있다고 이렇게 말씀해 주셨는데, 혹시 경기도에 어떤 제언을 해주실 게 있다면 좀 간단히 말씀 부탁드리겠습니다.
Okay, very practical and concrete question. So, any practical recommendation to Gyeonggi Province, Kibo?
Let's meet after the meeting. But I have just a quick comment. And you asked Professor Son, how do you prevent political influence on civilian exchanges? This is the crux of the problem. And I think we need to at least look at a possibility of doing something like an aggrieved framework 2.0, looking at civilian engagement and make sure that all sides, North Korea, US, or all the other communities, agree on certain principled approaches and what is not allowed, what is allowed. Set the rules down now. I think that's what we need.
Okay, any more comments or questions? Chairman Moon, perhaps you have some question, I think.
저도 뭐 한국말로 하겠습니다만은 우리 저 이규정 주무관께서 상당히 중요한 질문을 했는데 경기도가 어떤 역할을 할 수 있느냐. 우리 이주정 총장님께서는 다자적 접근이 필요하고 미국하고 하긴 힘드니까 유럽에 있는 여러 행위자들하고 같이 하면 북에서 상당히 리셉티비티가 있을 것 같다는 것, 뭐 저도 동의하고요. 저도 그렇게 일을 해봤기 때문에. 그다음 키팍 같은 경우도 지금 그 그 퍼블릭 헬스 서포트나 메디컬 서포트를 해주는 게 우리 정부하고 주로 하고 있는데 경기도 같은 데서 어떤 역할을 할 수 있는가? 그 다음에 우리 송남선 교수님 같은 경우도 경기도 같은 데서도 이제 학술적인 교류 같은 것도 상당히 이제 원하는데, 그러니까 지금 국제고려학회에서 하는 게 뭐 그 과학기술 뭐 사전 공통 용어집 같은 거 만든다든가 이런 것들이 있는데 경기도와 관련해서는 어떤 사업들이 있을 것인가? 요걸 조금 구체적으로 좀 제안을 해주시면은 경기도에서 상당히 도움이 될 거고, 내년도 코리아 유럽 피스 포럼을 할 때 그걸 참고로 해서 그 관련된 분들도 모시고 또 보다 구체적인 어떤 그 액션 플랜도 만들 수 있는 것 아닌가 이렇게 생각입니다. 그리고 마지막으로 말씀을 드리면 우리 키팍이 지금 상당히 중요한 말씀을 하셨거든요. 그러니까 agreed framework for civilian exchange and cooperation with North Korea that can insulate civilian exchange from any kinds of political and military turbulences. 그러니까 정치 군사적인 변수로부터 완전히 분리된 남북한 교류 협력. 근데 그건 북한만의 문제가 아니고 우리 남쪽 정부도 마찬가지거든요. 정부가 바뀌게 되면은 북한을 가령 적대시한다. 적대시하면은 우리 통일부에서 남북 교류 협력을 완전히 중단시키니까 그건 북한만 그러는 거 아닌 뜻이 아니고 우리도 그러기 때문에, 그리고 미국도 그러고 EU도 또 그렇거든요. 그런 것에서 벗어나기 위한 agreed framework, 기본 준칙 같은 걸 만드는 그런 운동을 시민사회에서 하는 것도 좋은 것 아닌가 이렇게 생각이 됩니다.
문 교수님 지적 고맙습니다. 제가 생각하기에는 새로운 그 프레임워크가 만들어져야 되는데, 아까 이선주 선생님께서 fair trading, fair exchange 그거 말씀하셨고, 키박은 comprehensive and strategic approaches to the exchange 이렇게 말씀하셨는데, 우리가 이 한반도에서 어떻게 지속 가능한 교류의 협력 공간을 만들겠는가, 이게 지금 우리가 직면하고 있는 문제거든요. 이걸 만들기 위해서는 여러 가지 그 민간 섹터가 움직여야 되죠. 국제거래학회도 그 중에 한 가지입니다. 그래 국제거래학회가 한 가지 유리한 것은 이게 남북한 교류 협력 테두리가 아니기 때문에 이게 국제적인 열린 그 네트워크이거든요. 그러니까 이게 북에 있어서도 이런 상황에서도 받아들이기가 쉬운 거예요. 남쪽에서 직접 하는 것보다. 이와 같은 그 공간을 더 만드는 것. 그리고 그게 문 교수님께서 지적하신 것처럼 이게 어떤 호상 받아들여진 공연된 규칙 혹은 그 약속에 따라 이루어지는 거. 이게 개별적으로 되다가 안 되다가 그런 문제가 아니거든요. 그와 같은 그 프레임워크를 만드는데 제가 여러 가지 제안을 받을 때 그 어려워요. 그 파트너를 어떻게 찾는가. 그럴 때 정부가 직접 하는 것도 아니고 민간을 가지고는 좀 이게 컨트롤이 되느냐. 그럴 때 경기도의 차원에서 그게 다루어지면은 훨씬 더 그 쉬운 공간이 만들어질 수 있다. 그렇게 생각합니다.
이 소장님, 우리 앙겔라 케인.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I found them very interesting presentations, so thank you. And I found it particularly encouraging because clearly what is happening is that there are entry points like Guy Park mentioned in terms of the World Health Organization. You mentioned Europe, you mentioned international organizations also. And one of the interesting aspects I find is you have the Sustainable Development Goals. And what is interesting is that North Korea has actually responded to the implementation. You know, there's like a voluntary yearly measuring of where are you, etc. So you have to find the entry points, like how can you engage with North Korea on the SDGs, for example. The other point that I find interesting is that the Secretary General and the General Assembly actually has agreed to have a higher level youth envoy. So, you know, now you've got more engagement with youth. I mean, that's something that the General Assembly has endorsed. Nobody voted against it. So again, would that be a possibility of an entry point? You know, you just have to find what are the levers that you can reach them, because I understand how difficult it is on a bilateral basis, but maybe on a multilateral basis, sort of it's taken down a bit, a step down a bit. It's less threatening, if you so want, or it's less punishing. So those are the two things that I thought you might think about in terms of how can we engage with North Korea on those two bases.
저도 이제 한마디만 더 말씀을 드리면은 가령 내년도 사업을 우리 경기도하고 프레드리 에버트 스티프팅이 이제 후원을 해줘서 우리 저 베를린 자유대학하고 우리 세종연구소가 같이 하는데 내년도 유럽에서 만약 한다면은 금년은 이제 다 됐고 내년 뭐 상반기라도 우리가 UN 유나이티드 네이션 세크리터리하고 얘기해서 UN에서 대표적인 분이 오고 북에서도 좀 대표적인 인사들이 당국자에서 오고 남에서도 당국자들이 오셔서 그리고 지금 학계, 공공보건, 그 다음에 우리 NGO 이런 식으로 해서 만약에 그런 모임을 하고 거기에서 agreed framework 그 만든다면은 그래서 정치 군사적인 그 상하고 관계없이 민간 차원에서 비정부 부분에서 교류 협력을 제도할 수 있는 걸 할 수 있으면 아마 윤석열 정부도 반대는 안 할 거라고 생각이 되는데요. 잠깐만요, 우리 저 이은정 교수께서 아마 하실 것 같은데 이 교수님.
제가 이따가 얘기를 말씀드리려고 했는데요. 네, 그러니까는 저희 아직도 구체적으로 내년에 어떻게 진행될까는 얘기를 그러니까 컨셉트를 봐야 되겠지만 여기 지금 도착한 에버트 재단에서 에버트 재단의 후원을 받아서 저희가 베를린에서 준비할 때는 지금 그러니까 조금 더 오늘 말씀하신 거 들어서 저희가 지금까지 해왔던 경험, 그거는 제가 다음 세션에서 더 말씀을 드릴 텐데요. 그걸 바탕으로 조금 더 구체적인 사업들에 대해서 논의를 할 수 있는 장을 만들어 보도록 하겠습니다.
예, 감사합니다. So time is almost up. So do you have any last word, Ki or 주성리?
If I may, 이규정 선생님, 제가 아까 질문을 물어본 거를 간단하게 대답했는데 그 의미는 더 많이 지금 제가 선생님한테 하실 말이 너무 많아서 직접 만나고 싶어서 할 말인데요. 저는 경기도가 역할이 엄청 크다고 보고 있습니다 지금. 그래서 좀 개인적으로 좀 대화를 나눕시다. 예.
이석 정관.
예, 뭐 구체적인 것들이 이제 실행할 수 있는 전략적 구상을 같게 나눈다라고 하는 되게 중요한 부분이 있을 것 같고요. 경기도의 역할과 관련한 부분에 있어서는 세종연구소가 원치 않을 수도 있겠지만 5년 동안은 무조건 지원하겠다라고 하는 협의를 중장기적 지속성을 담보하는 것이 가장 중요하다. 왜 그러면 정부라든가 지자체들이 그때그때마다 상황에 따라서 하고 안 하고를 결정하다 보면 이 사업이 진행되어지질 못하거든요. 그러다 보니 얼마큼 이 사업에 대한 필요성에 따라서 지원할 수 있는지, 그래서 내년에 확실한 지원과 협력이 담보되어져서 지금부터 계획할 수 있게끔 행정적 절차에 대한 부분도 명확하게 해줘야 된다. 물론 세종연구소가 동의해야만 가능합니다.
예, 감사합니다. 결국 오늘 이번 세션에서 토론한 내용을 간단히 정리하자면 이런 것 같습니다. 지금 정부 대 정부 차원의 접촉은 상호 불신이 너무 깊고 또 북한이 느끼는 그 안보 불안을 해소해줄 방안이 지금 없기 때문에 지금 시빌리언 인게이지먼트가 그나마 유용한 틀이다. 그리고 가급적이면 유럽 같은 그 파트너가 협력해서 다자적으로 접근하는 게 굉장히 중요하고, 그리고 가능하다면 이 시빌리언 인게이지먼트를 그 정치 군사적인 그 영향으로부터 조금 독립적으로 보호할 수 있는 그 어그리드 프레임이 필요하다. 그리고 지금 이 경색된 국면에서는 또한 북한과 인게이지할 수 있는 엔트리 포인트를 찾는 게 매우 중요하다. 이런 정도로 결론을 맺을 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그래서 오늘 아주 세 분의 재미있는 발표, 토론, 그리고 플로에서 여러 가지 질문에 감사드리고 이번 세션을 여기서 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Good afternoon and welcome to session 2-2. This session will be moderated by Jae-jung Lee, former Minister of Unification, and will include presentations by Wolfgang Nowak, former advisor to the German Chancellor, who is joining us virtually today, Glyn Ford, former member of the European Parliament, and Eun-jung Lee, professor and dean of Faculty of Asian Studies at the Free University of Berlin. Please join me in a round of applause to welcome our moderator and presenters.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, it is my great honor and privilege to moderate this session. And very successfully, we are here in the last session. That is very happy. Well, this session will talk about how to make breakthrough to store the relations with North Korea, reflecting the Europeans' experiences, particularly Europeans, how to build up the peace process in various contexts in Europe. So this session will deal with us with some new approach or much more practical approach, how to deal with our new way and how to open up our new approach for peacemaking on Korean Peninsula, particularly under this very unfortunate government. Well, and I think it is very important for us to say first to Sejong Institute and the Gyeonggi-do, particularly the new governor, Mr. Kim Dong-yeon, and also the Ebert Foundation, who have made this wonderful program forum and supporting this forum in this context. Well, prior to opening up our session, I would like to introduce my experience a little bit long time ago. In 1984, well, actually at that time, World Council of Churches and Korean National Council of Churches, and also the North Korean Christian Federation, they cooperate each other to open up a new dialogue in Tokyo. That was the first start of dialogue based on the non-governmental sector. And that conference has led new meetings, particularly in Lyon, Switzerland, in 1987. That was a very wonderful meeting as a kind of a pioneer how to build up the peace process among the people, particularly based on the confession of Christianity, and also following the making up the network among the churches of the whole world. That conference had been 3 times meetings in Lyon, and then the meeting was followed some countries through the very wonderful ideas sharing each other. And the other one is Gyeonggi-do is very important province in Korea in terms of size of economics, and in terms of population, and in terms of influences on the politics. And Gyeonggi-do is powerful province which can lead the Korean leadership particularly for making a peace process. As you know, Gyeonggi-do province shared the borderline with North Korea, and also surrounded the Seoul city. So Gyeonggi-do's role might be very important than ever, I think. And we have limited time at the moment, so each person has 20 minutes presentation, and probably moderator's role is how to control the time. Yes, time tension. So we will start first. Dr. Novak, who is online now through the Zoom, he is attending due to his something illness of the COVID-19. Yeah. And I invite you to present your paper at first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm here imprisoned in the hotel since Monday, since my arrival. And I know that in your country are strict rules. Therefore, I will shorten my presentation and concentrate on the last part, how to improve the relations between the two Koreas. And then Lynn Ford will have enough time to speak for 30, 40 minutes. It is not 5 to 12, but 10 past 12 in the GDR. I'm telling you this so that you can have a realistic idea of my country. That was what the Minister of Culture in the German Democratic Republic, Hans-Joachim Hoffmann, told me when we went for a walk alone in the woods around Potsdam in 1988. I'd spoken to him about an exhibition compiled of North Rhine-Westphalian, this is a big region in Germany, design colleges. It was to open in Leipzig in November 1989. And did. I was amazed at his words. Since the execution of the basic treaty, Grundlagenvertrag, between the two German states on December 21st in Germany in 1972, the GDR had increasingly gained international recognition. This has been not easy to make this, to construct this basic agreement between two states, but a peace treaty was not possible, and both states belonged to different military alliances. Therefore, it was a way out of an impossible situation. Two German states separated by a big wall and both in hostile environments. And I think this is the great work of Willy Brandt, and thanks to Willy Brandt, I became a member of the Social Democratic Party. The Grundlagenvertrag made possible that the GDR and Western Germany could set up embassies in the most important states, and the GDR could present in 1988 itself as the 11th strongest industrial nation in the world, ahead of Great Britain. In the basic treaties, both German states had agreed, among other things, to refrain from using violence when settling disputes and to respect mutual borders. It was very important for Western Germany, who always believed that Eastern Germany was only a Russian province. Both states promised to take part in the process of security and cooperation in Europe and to support disarmament efforts. They pledged to respect each other's autonomy and independence in internal and external affairs. It was decided to exchange permanent representation in both countries. Based on this treaty, a number of agreements on better cooperation were concluded in the years that followed, including in areas such as business, science, postal, and telecommunications and culture. In 1980, an agreement was reached on the construction of a motorway between the two Germanies and the expansion of the railway connection between Berlin and Western Germany. Finally, on May 6, 1986, an agreement was reached between the government of the Federal Republic of Germany and Eastern Germany. Just a moment. On cultural cooperation, this agreement had brought me to Minister Hoffmann in Berlin, and I may add that this agreement also enabled Christian churches in Western Germany to restore Christian buildings in Eastern Germany, or to help to rebuild Christian town centers which had been destroyed during the Second World War. Erich Honecker, the then leader of the Socialist Party in Eastern Germany, had at this time demonstrated his self-confidence towards the Soviet Union. In 1987, against the will of the Soviet Union, he made a state visit to Western Germany. He banned the German edition of the Russian magazine Sputnik because he did not like the content. In Europe, by the way, unification was not an issue at all. 60% of West Germans under 30 saw the GDR as a foreign country. They wanted good relations between the two countries, but not unification. Overall, the division of Germany was recognized as the price for Germany's fall of World War II. In 1988, the sentence Germany will be united with God and the NATO by the first West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer just caused a shake of the head. When I reported my conversation with Minister Hoffmann after my return from Berlin, I encountered a lack of understanding. The head of the Federal Intelligence Service later told me that they had been informed about the unstable situation in the GDR since 1987, but the West German government did not believe them. Today, we know that Minister Hoffmann was right. Because of its politics, the GDR system was on the brink of collapse. And now I shorten up. The GDR had, in this time, from 1970 on, had lived beyond their means. They had exported mostly to Western countries and not longer to Eastern European countries, and they had got a lot of financial help from Western Germany. Like Western European countries, the Soviet Union was against closer relations between the two German states. This was even in Germany, it was very difficult. The Christian Democrats voted against the Grundlagenvertrag, but they didn't stop it at the end. But there were many people went to the courts to try to prevent this agreement from being concluded. Like Western European countries, the Soviet Union was against closer relations between the countries, but it was no longer able at the end of the end of the 80s, to prevent talks between the two German states. The GDR received further loans from Western Germany, and in return offered to ease German travel conditions. This is a long process of rapprochement in a not very friendly environment. Gorbachev's statement that he would no longer interfere in the internal affairs of the Eastern Bloc countries fueled reforms in these countries, and this was seen by the inhabitants of Eastern Germany thanks to West German television. However, the politicians in East Berlin failed to implement the necessary reforms and measurements for liberalization. They feared, and it's justified, that they would then be voted out and that they would lose their power. The fear that reforms, like those in Poland and Hungary, could endanger the existence of the GDR regime became the leitmotif of an increasingly disoriented GDR government. On the other side, the population saw the reforms around them, saw the new spirit of democracy, and a new future mood spread across the country. Well, violence against it was forbidden. It would also have been a breach of the basic treaty. A breach of the treaty would have brought the end of economic aid by the FRG, by Western Germany. The economic survival of the GDR would no longer have been secured. At the same time, more and more GDR citizens fled the country looking for a better future in Western countries. As a result, and in Western Germany, as a result, the GDR had to close its border with Poland. The refugees now changed their route and fled to Hungary. Hungary eventually opened its border with Austria, supported by a secret 1 billion Deutschmark loan provided by the Kohl government. The government of the GDR had to cope with further destabilization because of the escaping people, since the Soviet Union had problems of its own due to Mr. Gorbachev's politics and Gorbachev did not endanger his path to Europe with a military dictatorship. The GDR government ignored the call for reforms, which also endangering its existence would have preserved the GDR existence as an independent German state. There was a possibility of a second German state with a different government, different parties at this time. And it was supported by France, the Netherlands, Great Britain, and the Netherlands, because they wanted to hold on to it as a second German state, also the German Social Democrats, not Willy Brandt, and the Greens. Margaret Thatcher, the British Prime Minister, said, "We have beaten the Germans twice, but now they are back." The Russian government, François Mitterrand, desperately tried to prevent a unified Germany, but he couldn't stop it. He even went, after the wall came down, to Eastern Berlin to make his advances to the completely helpless Eastern German government. But as in 1900 and but in late 1989, Mr. Gorbachev was still against reunification. It must be prevented, he said, or he will be replaced by a Russian general. The Monday demonstration in Leipzig, Berlin, and Dresden grew in size, and the slogans give a fair description of what had happened during these weeks. The first slogan, no violence. And after some time, we are the people. And then suddenly, the wake-up call also for Western Germany that they didn't want unification, but that they wanted to have an independent state. They are shouting, we are staying here. But shortly after that, again, we are one people. And when the last slogan was Germany, United Fatherland. Those in the GDR and Western Germany who wanted an independent East German state, also for economic reasons, were hardly heard. The time slot for a new beginning in the GDR had passed. On November 9th, 1989, I was in Leipzig to visit the design exhibition I had been planning. I watched the demonstrations on the streets with quite amazement and great admiration. Later in my hotel, I was confronted with the news that the wall had fallen in Berlin. All the waiters, most of the waiters and the personnel of the hotel, although in Leipzig, were going to the west, to the broken walls, and my experience was the next day there was no breakfast. Chancellor Kohl was in Poland at the time. Everyone was surprised. The GDR had collapsed, which nobody had expected. A few days later, I flew from Leipzig to Moscow. I was instructed not to talk at all about reunification. I received an order by the federal government. Chancellor Kohl had to behave very cautiously towards the US and the Soviet Union, and of course, towards Great Britain and France. At that time, nobody could have had anything against self-determination. When the Minister of Culture of this then Russian Federation welcomed me after my arrival in Moscow, he beamed at me and said in a loud voice, everyone to hear, Mr. Novak, congratulations on the reunification. A year later, I became State Secretary in the first government of the Free State of Saxony. In 1990, the last year of its existence, the economy of the GDR collapsed. The currency exchange at the ratio of 1 to 2, 1 Deutschmark for 2 East German marks, led to the dramatic decline of exports to countries in the former Eastern Bloc, also in Western Europe. After reunification, GDR citizens became immigrants in their own country. Everything had changed: the legal system, the economy, and also the language. Their lifetime achievements and degrees have been subjected to a harsh, often humiliating recognition process by the West German authorities. When I set up a new administration in Dresden, neither being a West German nor being an Eastern German, when I set up this administration with my regional collaborators under unbelievable conditions in 1991, it became clear to me in a conversation with my employees. For the first time in history, a country was divided by reunification. No exit. This is the title of the best book, in my view, which has been written in the 90s about the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. And I recommend also the book of Glyn Ford, which is also very excellent and which I loved reading. I say this because I want a friendly reply from him after my speech. I met the author, Jonathan Pollack, but he did in 2012, before my first travel to North Korea, he did not give me any hope that the Korean Peninsula problems could be solved. And the Chinese diplomat responsible for relations with North Korea, Chu Hu, at the time, spoke only negatively about the possibility of anything positive being done in the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. And John Mearsheimer, with whom I discussed the situation on the Korean Peninsula 2 months ago, before I got the invitation from you, made it clear to me that there was no solution of the conflict. And he said it could explode and lead to war any time. The former Minister of Unification, our chairman, describes the current policy toward North Korea as a policy of, I quote, negative hostile neglect. I think he's right. However, a collapse of the People's Republic, as it happened with the GDR, will not take place. China will do everything to prevent it. That is what the Chinese representative in North Korea told me before my first trip. That is still China's policy today. By 2018, the Chinese-North Korean relations were not close. At the end of 2015, Chinese diplomats told me to tell Kang Sok-ju, with whom he was very ill at this time, I had some meetings, that unfortunately they still hadn't made contact with the advisors of the new chairman. I mentioned that to Kim Sok-ju, but unfortunately I did not have a reply. But it was always certain, and the Chinese were very clear, that they would not tolerate a united Korea at its border that stands on the side of the United States. There's no doubt that the United States would never tolerate a united Korea that stands on the side of China. There is no doubt that North Korea is convinced it can only secure its existence as a state when owning nuclear weapons. The North Korean leadership considers incidents or wars like those in Libya, Iraq, and Syria, and last not least in Ukraine, as a confirmation of its policy. I remember a conversation I had in 2017 in November when I was in Pyongyang, and I was told that they could only negotiate with the USA until they were able to reach US territory with their missiles. Korea was always afraid of an American nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula, which was only on the Korean Peninsula, not outside. Even Bill Clinton had challenged this idea. To put it briefly, the nuclear second strike capability is North Korea's insurance policy. If all, North Korea will only give up its nuclear weapons at the end of a very, very long peace process. For economic reasons, the DPRK cannot keep up with the increasing armament of South Korea and the United States. In the event of a military conflict, it could only assert itself against a technically superior opponent with nuclear battlefield weapons. A preemptive strike against North Korea would trigger a nuclear response. This corresponds to the Russian military doctrine of 2010. This was also the doctrine of the DPRK. I quote, "Its aim in this field is not only to preserve a robust deterrence, but also to develop options for the use of nuclear weapons in case of a conventional conflict where conventional forces fail to repel the aggressor. In particular, Russia has refined options for limited demonstration strikes aimed at de-escalating conventional conflict." It's a quote from the Oxford Handbook of War from page 282. The world power China and the world power US have not succeeded in securing peace on the Korean Peninsula. And also United Nations have failed, and they're failing every day. Sanctions didn't help, and the international ostracism of North Korea didn't help, and even the threats of fury and fire had not helped. In 2018, after the Panmunjom meeting of the two presidents, I was a guest of the North Korean Workers' Party. The country had changed almost completely compared to 2017. Optimism. And the spirit of optimism could be felt everywhere. At celebration in September, the Korean War was no longer portrayed as a victory over the great enemy, the United States, but as a terrible event. War was presented in the big theater and also in small theaters, as in the country stadium, as an existential threat that must be avoided. At the end of a grandiose spectacle in Pyongyang Stadium, the crowds erupted in unbelievable applause. The final image shows no missile, no nuclear weapon explosion, but President Moon and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un holding hands. It wasn't an ordered applause. It was spontaneous enthusiasm, and the people and myself had tears in their eyes. At the end, a Viennese waltz was played, not a parade of weapons, to which young Korean couples danced in national costumes from nearly all nations. Unfortunately, we Germans were once again showed in lederhosen. I felt this optimism during my visit in 2019. Together with an economic expert, I had long talks with the party leadership about the future economic development of the country, where they were still optimistic that the peace process would continue. It was agreed that an economic boom must not just be limited to the sale of raw materials for hard currency. The aim of the leadership was to develop a long-term, efficient economy in cooperation with countries such as Canada, Sweden, Poland, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, as well as South Korea. A kind of savings bank system was planned for the banking system. The interlocutors were open for the idea that an international, I repeat, international, and I repeat again, independent advisory board of industrialists, bankers, and economists should accompany the country's economic development. It was clear to them that the tourism industry could only be really successful if the tourist hostel also had access to Western media. The atmosphere was positive. We had a friendly atmosphere. We had even laughed about the quality of North Korean wine. Shortly thereafter, the negotiation in Hanoi failed because of the maximum demands made by the US. I think that the then former secretary of North Korea told me how it happened. And finally, Trump had to give in to his advisors who warned him against the direction of the American Republicans and others. The sanctions remained in place. Unfortunately, sorry to say so, South Korea was not willing to allow tourists into the Diamond Mountain again, open the industrial complex in Kaesong, and reactivate rail and road connection from South to North Korea. If this would have happened, we might have today another situation. North Korea had made significant advance efforts, no missile tests, halting nuclear research, etc., but nothing had been achieved. The reformers in North Korea could not produce any results that would have legitimized a continuation of the peace policy in the long term. They could not deliver. One has to imagine that at the grand military parade in September 2018, the country's oldest official, Kim Jong-nam, gave a speech, and he told the military who were sitting there all full of breath, and the soldiers who were in the audience, and he told the military and the entire leadership that a period of economic development was beginning, and that the military must now contribute as well to this development. In the summer of 2019, the military gave him the answer. The party newspaper wrote that it should actually be clear that only the military and not the diplomats are the best protection for a country. Nevertheless, North Korea was ready to send a delegation to the Munich Security Conference in February 2020. I had the honor to prepare this with Professor Moon for over a half year, but then came COVID-19, I'm a victim as well. And this is the current situation from my point of view, my personal point of view. And my final words. China has always defended itself with walls. The concept of active defense, according to Deng Xiaoping, meant not only defense behind, but also in front of the walls. The enemy should be fought at long range. Thus, the walls should be pushed against the enemy. The large Chinese cities represent the modern Chinese wall. But the Chinese are not ready to sacrifice them in a future war. China has therefore expanded its defense. Thanks to an aggressive island policy and the development of the most modern weapons, American aircraft carriers are only safe from defensive weapons in about 2,000 nautical miles from China. The Americans need to replace their aircraft carriers, and the new aircraft carriers might be Japan, Okinawa, South Korea. The more South Korea opens up to the American desires to further arm the country, the greater is the risk of a conflict between South Korea and China if we have the same situation with Ukraine and Russia. The Chinese will not accept a shift in the balance of power on the Korean peninsula at their disadvantage, and they are therefore opposed to any change in the military status quo in North Korea. South Korea and the US are holding military maneuvers again this year during the harvest and sowing season in North Korea. As a result, North Korea suffers considerable economic damage. It cannot use soldiers in farming. A maneuver is a drill, a bloodless battle. But this battle can immediately develop into a bloody drill. We saw this in Ukraine. The Chinese showed it in the Taiwan Strait that they can do it too. And of course, the North Koreans fear this situation. It is 5 to 12 in the region. A peace treaty is not possible. There is no danger of an economic crisis in North Korea. There will be no popular uprising in the People's Republic of North Korea, which unfortunately many are still hoping for. The management of natural disasters and the successful management of the pandemic have increased people's trust in the government. In addition, the standard of living has improved enormously in my eyes since 2012. If both states move farther apart one day, they will be so far apart that they will collide. A radical new beginning is required. Not doing the old way, but find a new way. And now, based on the German experience, I'm pleading for a basic treaty between the two Korean states. Of course, it has to start with confidential negotiation and not with a megaphone. And above all, both states have the courage to go a small step further than China and the USA would like to see. We did it in Germany as well. A permanent public tribunal over North Korea should be avoided. This and aggressive press releases, as well as the sending of hate balloons, are an expression of speechlessness. Both sides have to make an effort to have a lot of understanding for the other side in order to be able to talk to each other. And any support is given to North Korea must not be seen as charity, but at the beginning of a cooperation between equal partners. And the sanctions they absolutely loses must be abandoned unconditionally. Both sides should exchange ambassadors. A first step to implement the agreements reached would be to implement the agreement reached in Panmunjom. And then you can proceed as in the basic treaty between the two German states. Travel between the two countries should be improved, and development aid for North Korea should come from Europe, also from Canada and Singapore. The aim of every round of negotiation must be to build trust. It's important that the partners inform each other about all military action. The long-term goal must be a partnership between two independent states. They must bond so closely that neither of them needs nuclear weapons. A cultural exchange promotes this partnership. I'll give you a small example. You have excellent classical musicians in your country. The training of young artists is extraordinary. Why not create a classical orchestra, half from your country, half from the other side? It has been possible between the Palestinians and the Jews. Why is it not possible in this area where you have so extraordinary talented musicians? I love classical music. In short, both Korean states must be willing to see the world and themselves through the eyes of the other state. And both states must have the courage to break new ground instead of allowing themselves to be drawn into the conflicts of the US and China. How can this help organize? I listen to the first thing. I rebuilt the state of Saxony. We had partners from regions in Germany, like a region like this one, but only have a partner from the other side with the same language doesn't help. But we were very successful when we had partners. And in my case, we had partners from Switzerland, the canton of Zurich, not the state. We had partners from the city of Vienna. We had partners from a region in France. And thus we could work together. And this created a mini international atmosphere which created trust. I'm skeptical and optimistic, of course, that both states can conclude a basic agreement. It's impossible, but the impossible sometimes is possible. Skepticism is justified, given the problems faced in this region. And yet I'm confident. If you want to do and see something new, you have to make something new. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wolfgang Novak, for your very good and wonderful, very thoughtful presentation, through which we can get some wisdom or ideas how to build up our self-determination on the sides of both sides of North Korea, where to see the world and themselves, ourselves through the eyes of the other state worldwide. Open up our eyes. They're very important, and we have to put some emphasis on the worldwide global network in order to solve the problems of Korean Peninsula. Well, thank you very much again. And in order to save the time, we need to control the time again. Well, now the Glenn, I'm sorry, Glenford.
Yes.
Yes, I invite you, Mr. Glenford, to present his paper to you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Can I say I agreed with everything my friend Wolfgang Novak said, apart from two words. And the two words were "in short." For someone who says he was going to make a short presentation and overran by 50%, I'm glad he didn't make a long presentation. But yes, I've been traveling to North Korea now for a quarter of a century. I first went to North Korea in 1997 when I was a member of the European Parliament. I had a visit from the North Korean embassy in Paris to UNESCO. They said they needed emergency food aid. They had a problem. At the time, it wasn't possible for the North Koreans to speak to European Commission officials. They were forbidden from speaking to North Korean diplomats. Only one member state of the European Union at the time, Sweden, actually had an embassy in Pyongyang, and only two others, Denmark and Portugal, actually had diplomatic relations. So I said if they wanted food aid, I needed to see what the situation was on the ground. I needed to see it. And I went in an unofficial delegation of 3 Labour members of the European Parliament to visit North Korea. I told them there's no point showing us the nice things. If we're going to go back and argue the case for emergency aid, I need to see what the real situation is. And we visited Pyongyang, the children's homes, the children's centers, the hospitals, the orphanages. And I'm not a doctor, but I could see hungry children. And it was clear that there was a problem and they needed help. I said to them that would they like an official delegation from the European Parliament? They said yes, and I said, you don't care how I get it? No. So we went back and we tabled a rather critical resolution demanding access to North Korea for a delegation from the European Parliament, which was passed. Everybody voted for it. Critical resolution on North Korea is not a problem. And off it went to the North Korean government. To everyone's surprise, apart from mine and my 2 colleagues, the response was, yes, please send a delegation. And that was the first official delegation that went from the European Parliament. It was led by Leo Tindemans, the former Belgian Prime Minister, and I was part of it. And there were a series of further delegations until in 2004, the European Parliament established a standing delegation with the Korean Peninsula at my suggestion. And that standing delegation still exists today, and in fact will be visiting Seoul next week, though not Pyongyang. That got me engaged with North Korea, and I've now traveled, as some of you are well aware, almost 50 times to North Korea in a variety of guises. The luck I had, and it was luck rather than anything else, is because I was a politician. Our interlocutor was actually the Workers' Party of Korea. That's not by any virtue on my part, but by accident. But it does mean we get to talk to, if you want, people that most other people don't have access to. Most 1.5 delegations actually end up talking to the Foreign Ministry, the Institute for Disarmament and Peace, or the American Studies Institute. We're talking to the International Department of the Party. Back in 2010, I was approached by the party to say they would like a standing dialogue with European political parties. Frankly, that wasn't possible. No European political party would want to do that. But I suggested instead that what we should have is I should collect together a group of senior former politicians, including Wolfgang Novak at one time, to actually have a dialogue. And Jonathan Powell, who was the Tony Blair's chef de cabinet from when he became leader through to when he stood down as prime minister, and myself have been running this dialogue now for the last 10 years. We've been probably on about 15 occasions to Pyongyang. They came once. Kang Suk-ju came to Berlin on a single occasion in 2014. But we've had this dialogue with the international secretary. Initially, it was Kim Jong-nam, who was, Kim Jong-il, who was an uncle of Kim Jong-il. Then it was Kang Suk-ju, very briefly. It was Chae Tae-bok, and then it was Ri So-young. And we've had that dialogue all the way through with the international secretary of the party. The last one we talked to, Ri So-young, was a member of the Politburo, a member of the executive of the Politburo, a vice chairman of the Politburo, and he was one of the 4 North Koreans in the room with Donald Trump. So we've had that dialogue over that period of time. Of course, with COVID, everything's on hold. We haven't traveled there since the COVID closed down, although the North Koreans have indicated to me through the embassy in London that they would like to continue the dialogue when the things open up. One of the problems with continuing the dialogue is actually getting to North Korea. And the elephant in the room that no one's talked about is China, because while China maintains its zero COVID policy, frankly, it's impossible to get into North Korea. No one's going to travel via Russia at the moment. And if you've got to spend a week in quarantine on the way in and out of China, I can't persuade anyone to do that, let alone myself. So, I mean, that's something that needs to be overcome. I have raised the issue of actually accessing through South Korea, but I think that might be a political bridge too far. On the basis of the work of this engagement, I have some inconvenient truths that I need to pass on, in the sense that there are massive misconceptions between the United States and North Korea about the process of dialogue. For the United States, complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization is a precondition for the North of any settlement. For the North Korean, that CVID is at the end of a long process that will probably take a decade and more. It's a process that's going to have a whole series of steps and stages. North Korea has absolutely no interest at the moment in unification. Ri So-young made it very clear that a unification at the moment would be assimilation. It would be what happened to East Germany, as Wolfgang Novak so graphically told us. And that is not something that North Korea is prepared to tolerate. What they want is eventual reunification, but that's after, if you want, they have the opportunity to grow their economy. The cause of their economic failure for them, of course, is US and UN sanctions. If those were lifted, North Korea believes it could grow its economy at 10% plus a year, and if it did that for 25 years, then at least they would be in the same economic league as South Korea. At that point, you could talk about unification, but only then. You have other problems as well if you have unification. You would need to deal with the issue of human rights violations. I mean, you would need to look at a Truth and Reconciliation Commission like they had in South Africa. You may well need to look at a situation like the United Kingdom had when we had the Irish peace process, that the terrorists from the IRA were actually given letters guaranteeing they would not be prosecuted and sent to prison. On that basis, you could possibly talk about reunification at a certain period. Secondly, the North's nuclear development is a sign not of strength, but of weakness. They're doing what they're doing because they are weak and not because they are strong. If you look at North Korea's spending on its military, it's 25% of its GDP. There's no possibility of seriously increasing that. Yet 25% of North Korea's GDP means that South Korea only outspends North Korea in military terms by a factor of 5. If you add together Japan and the United States, North Korea is outspent by a factor of 50. North Korea's military spending is 2% of that of South Korea, Japan, and the United States. Part of that is the problem of the South's economic success. I mean, the South's economy is probably 50, 60 times stronger than that of North Korea. At a very small percentage spent on, or comparatively small percentage of the economy spent on the military in South Korea, means that if you want, the North's nuclear doctrine is the illegitimate offspring of the South's economic success. For the North Koreans, the nuclear program solves two problems. It solves the problem of an external threat to the state, but it also starts to solve the problem of the internal economy. North Korea's two big blockages, two big shortages, are energy and manpower. The nuclear doctrine actually helps with both. Firstly, it would allow North Korea to shift away from conventional defense, conventional offense, or whatever. If you just decrease the time in the army by a year, that would free up 100,000 men. Equally, of course, the nuclear program allows for a civil nuclear industry, and North Korea is very wedded to that. The problem is that by having the nuclear program, you have the sanctions, and that's the catch-22. You need to break that link. North Korea has a vision, a very old-fashioned vision for its economy, which is an economy with thousands of people working in factories. It just might work. It's not the model we have around the rest of the world these days, but it just might work because North Korea is probably the world's last pool of cheap, skilled labor, as we've seen in places like Rasong and elsewhere, and you saw with the Kaesong industrial complex. So that might be a model for economic development at one stage. The New Year's address in 2018 was full of bomb blast and threat. I'm developing nuclear weapons. I've got a nuclear button. I can threaten you. The only good thing in it was actually the opening up for the Pyeongchang Olympics, and that was the line everybody paid attention to. Interestingly, the signal that the North was prepared to engage came in the 2019 nuclear address, where they talked about making no more nuclear weapons, non-proliferation, no testing, and all of that, of course, was founded on the success of Singapore. I used to say that with Donald Trump, I'm a member of the British Labour Party. I'm proud of the fact. So it's not surprising. But with Donald Trump, I said I agreed with nothing he was doing apart from North Korea. I'm not sure after Hanoi I can even say that. With Joe Biden, my problem has been different. I agree with everything Biden's done, maybe not quite, apart from North Korea. He's made a series of missteps that make it more difficult to get back to negotiations. It's a car crash that's killed the engagement process. Firstly, they didn't want to use the same language as Trump. So instead of talking about denuclearizing the peninsula, they insisted on talking about denuclearizing North Korea. Now that seems a small change. But for the North Koreans, that was code for you can't have a civil nuclear program. Because denuclearizing the peninsula meant you can have a civil program because the South's not going to give up its civil nuclear program. So that's fine. When people talk about denuclearizing North Korea, they think they've gone back to that era when there was going to be no civil nuclear program as well. Secondly, engaging Japan. The problem with Japan, from the North Korean perspective, it's Japan that actually sabotaged the six-party talks. I understand, I spent time in Japan, I was a physics professor at the University of Tokyo, but for the abductee issue is burnt deeply in Japanese civil society. Nevertheless, it was because of that that all progress from the North Korean perspective on the six-party talks was actually blocked by Japan, which is why there was no possibility until recently of actually returning to that format. Partly because Prime Minister Abe and his successor Suga, both from the same faction of the party, owed their political careers, in a sense, to that abductee issue. Prime Minister Kishida is in a different position. Interestingly, Kishida is the last senior Japanese politician to actually talk directly with the North Koreans. We brought Kang Suk-ju to Berlin in 2014 as part of our dialogue. It just happened that Kishida, then foreign minister, was sharing the same hotel as us. The following morning, the North Koreans looked as if they'd had no sleep. And about a fortnight later, there was an announcement on some agreement on the abductee issue that subsequently fell apart. So he's from a different faction of the LDP. It seems to me that there's a possibility there that things might just open up. What does the DPRK want? They want two things. They want security guarantees, and they want reparations for giving up their nuclear program, or even slowing it. The security guarantees, we were told by Kang Suk-ju very simply, are not a letter from a US president saying we pose no threat to you. They had one of those from Bill Clinton. It didn't actually work very well. Secondly, as I said, reparations. What will security guarantees look like? Well, we had the agreed framework back in the 1990s, and the agreed framework was torn up by President Bush. And when he tore it up in 2002, that was it. It was over. The agreed framework was dead. What the North Koreans were very interested in was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in Iran. Because as somebody said earlier, that Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action did not fail, did not collapse when President Trump reneged on the deal. China and Russia, of course, supported the Iranians, but so too did the European Union, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. And the consequence of that was that the Iran deal, the JCPOA, had a resilience and a robustness that the agreed framework never had. We're still in the process of renegotiating that Iran deal now. Whether it's successful may depend on the outcome of the midterm elections in the United States. But it managed to survive. So you will be looking, in terms of security guarantees, for something like the JPCOA. It would be the P5, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council plus. It will be a different plus from Iran. It would clearly involve the Republic of Korea, without question, hopefully Japan, and maybe the European Union. So on that basis, North Korea wants to internationalize the final deal. It's going to be based on an agreement between North and South and between Washington and Pyongyang. But at that level of security guarantees, it needs to be internationalized. The United States also has to internationalize the process. Why is that? Because the North demands reparations. The agreed framework was going to give the North Koreans 2 light water reactors at a cost of roughly $4.5 billion. What they're going to get this time round may be very different. But if you actually look at inflation and you look at the fact that you're not freezing a nuclear program, but you're rolling back a nuclear program over a decade and more, then that bill is going to be considerably higher. I was estimating it at 15 to 20 billion. But after the generosity of the West in funding weapons to Ukraine, I suspect the bill probably has gone up. Nevertheless, it's still comparatively small amounts of money to solve a problem. The difficulty is that President Biden, A, will not want to give money to North Korea, and B, will not be able to, because the idea that Congress is going to pass a bill to supply money to North Korea is impossible. We saw that with the agreed framework. The United States gave nothing apart from some heavy fuel oil. It was the Republic of Korea, Japan, and to a small degree, the European Union that provided the funding. The only time I ever got a direct phone call from Tony Blair was to say, I was the rapporteur in the European Parliament for Cato, saying, could I make sure that extra money was put in, because Clinton couldn't even supply the money to fund the heavy fuel oil, and the European Union did it clandestinely under our Euratom Treaty. So that money, where's it going to come from? 2/3 to 3/4 will come from the Republic of Korea. A block will probably come from the European Union. Angela Merkel, during the heady days of Trump, talked about the European Union being able to provide a billion euros. And I think they'll probably do that again. And obviously, subject to what I've already said, you could possibly get something from Japan. But all of that requires trust building. And we've been talking about that here today. Key Park's suggestion on a health program, some of the suggestions for cultural and artistic links, all of which could be provided by Gyeonggi Province, amongst others. Because if you build that trust, it's going to be not just from the top down, it's got to be from the bottom up. You need to engage people, you need to engage civil society as well. So it's going to be a national program in the South. It's not going to be something that's done just in ministries and just in the offices of politicians. So that's where we're going to go. It seems to me that if you want to engage with Europe, there are opportunities that can be done there. I mentioned to Professor Moon earlier that some 20 years ago, the Japanese province of prefecture of Oita actually ran a major project with the European Union over a period of a week. There are educational projects. There were the business people, politicians came and met with people in the European Union. And some similar démarche may be something that can be done this time round. So if we focus on that, then we may get somewhere. It's a long, hard road. It's not going to be easy. And again, we had the quote earlier that you could take the easy route and get nowhere, or you can take the rocky road, the twisting long road, which gets you somewhere you want to go at the end. I wish you well, and I will be with you on that journey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greenfield. Well, I really appreciate your good points of view for the Gyeonggi province, what to do for the future. Well, for us to build up our trust between the North and South, not on the base of a top-down way, but bottom-up. Very important to build up the foundation of non-governmental sector, including local government's role. Yes, it is long, hard work, but we have to not give up to make a new way, new attempt. Thank you. And last speaker, we invite Dr. Lee Eun-jung, and you are the final presenter. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 저는 그러니까 I ask you use the translator. 저기 그러니까 정치적인 지금 교류 협력에 관해서 그리고 굉장히 다양한 다양한 그러니까 제안들을 드셨는데요. 저는 아주 작은 차원에서 그러니까 베를린 자유대학교 차원에서 진행되고 있는 그러니까 구체적인 교류 협력 사례에 관해서 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 그래서 정치적인 이야기는 전혀 없고요. 어떻게 이 교류 협력이 구체적으로 진행될 수 있었는지, 그리고 어떤 것들이 진행되고 있고 그것이 어떤 효과를 가져왔는지에 관해서 말씀을 드리고, 마지막에 그러니까 경기도와 한국에서 생각해 볼 수 있는 부분들에서 함께 생각할 포인트들을 말씀드려 보겠습니다. 먼저 저희가 하고 있는 이 교류 협력 사업은 어떻게 보면은 대학과 대학 간에 진행되는 아주 노멀한, 아주 일상적인 교류 협력 사업이거든요. 그러니까 베를린 자유대학교는 전 세계 180개 대학들과 교류 협력 사업을 하고 있습니다. 그것이 교류 협력 양해각서일 수도 있고 교류 협력을 위한 MOU일 수도 있는데요. 이 교류 협력의 그러니까 김일성 자유대학과 김일성 종합대학과 자유대학 간의 교류 협력은 교류 협력 양해각서 교환으로 시작되었습니다. 그런데 이 교류 협력이 시작된 계기는 아주 오래 전으로 돌아가야 될 것 같은데요. 그러니까 독일 통일 이전에 동독과 북한 간에 아주 긴밀한 교류 협력 관계가 있었죠. 그런데 통일이 되고 나서 훔볼트 대학에, 그러니까 베를린에 있는 훔볼트 대학에 있었던 한국학과가 폐지되고 자유대학교가 한국학과를 개설하면서 김일성 종합대학에서는 독일에 있는 대학들 중에 교류 협력할 수 있는 파트너로 저희 대학을 확인해 본 것 같습니다. 그래서 2011년에 자유대학교로 초청장이 왔습니다. 김일성 대학에서 국제회의를 개최하는데 참가해달라. 그리고 이어서 교류 협력에 관해서 함께 논의해보자라는 초청장이 왔고 저희 학교에서 그거를 거부하지 않고 먼저 저희 학교 대표를 그러니까 저희 학교에 저희 연구원들을 제가 파견을 했거든요. 그리고 나서 곧바로 공식적으로 2012년에 교류 협력 양해각서가 평양에서 저희한테 왔습니다. 그래서 2014, 15년에 여러 차례, 그러니까 저희 연구원들이 평양을 방문을 하고 다시 한번 구체적인 의사를 검토를 해보고 난 다음에 그러면은 먼저 김일성 대학에서 자유대학을 한번 방문을 해라 했더니 김일성 대학에서 2014년에 학생들 7명이 수학여행을 베를린으로 왔었습니다. 그래서 그러니까 이미 교류 협력 양해각서를 교환하기 이전에 양쪽 학교에서 다양한 방식으로 교류 협력을 했었고요. 그러한 협력을 바탕으로 해서 저희가 2015년에 교류 협력 양해각서를 체결하러 이제 그 문안을 만들려 평양을 방문을 했습니다. 그때는 저희 학교에서 공식적인 사절단으로 저를 대표로 보냈거든요. 그런데 북에서는 그러니까 남한국 쪽에 제가 자유대학교 대표로 독일 연방의회의 의원단하고 함께 평양에 왔었다는 것이 굉장히 불편한 상황이었었던 것 같아요. 처음에는. 그런데 그것조차도 익숙해졌었던 것 같습니다. 그런데 저희가 이때 갔을 때는 당시에 북한에 있었던, 그러니까 북한에 있는 독일 전문가들, 독일에서 공부했었던 아니면은 독일에서 장학생으로 공부했었던 모든 사람들의 동문회가 열렸던 시기였습니다. 그래서 이 회의에서 저희 쪽에서는 그러니까 독일 대사관하고 연방의회에서 저희 자유대학교 협력 사업을 지원을 해줬고 김일성 대학 쪽에서는 대외협력처에서 나와서 회의를 담당을 했는데, 그러니까 저기 이정혁 의장이 같이 자리를 하면서 이거를 가능하면은 성사시켜 달라고 저희 두 학교에, 그러니까 김일성 대학과 저희 자유대에 부탁을 했었습니다. 그래서 저희가 협의한 결과는 아주 일반적인 교류 협력입니다. 학생 교류, 연구자 교류, 그리고 퍼블리케이션 교류. 그래서 학생 교류는 학생들이 개별적으로 원할 때는 교환 학생으로 보내서 한 달씩, 두 달씩 체류하게 하자. 그다음에 양쪽 학생들의 답사. 저희가 서머스쿨을 한국에서 진행하는 것처럼 평양에서도 서머스쿨에 참여할 수 있도록 하고 평양 학생들도 그러니까 김일성대 학생들도 베를린에서 서머스쿨에 참여할 수 있게 하자 하는 게 첫 번째 합의였고요. 두 번째는 연구 교류에서는 공동 연구를 추진한다는 것하고 그다음에 연구자들의 단기 교류를 활성화한다는 것이었습니다. 그런데 단기 교류라는 것은 독일 학술교류재단, 그러니까 DAAD라는 기관에서는 그러니까 독일 연구자가 외국으로 갈 때나 외국 연구자가 독일로 올 때 비용을 전부 지원을 해주는 프로그램이 있거든요. 그러니까 이런 프로그램을 활용해서 연구자 간의 교류도 추진을 하자라고 했고, 그다음에 이제 연구 성과는 같이 공유한다라는 걸로 합의를 하면서 이 시기에 이제 저희들이 더 확인한 거는 이 학생들은 지금 보시는 학생들은 김일성대 당시 4학년 김일성대학교의 동문과의 4학년 재학 중인 학생들이었는데 이 학생들이 4학년 여름방학 때 독일을 방문을 했었습니다. 그러니까 저희 학교를 방문을 해서 그때는 방문만 하였던 것이었거든요. 서머스쿨에 참여한 것이 아니라 그런데 독일에 방문했던 것이 도움이 됐냐 하니까 독일 사람 없이 그냥 원어민한테 독일어를 배운 것이 아니라 책과 영어로만 배우던 독일어를 베를린에 와서 직접 써보고 자기들이 너무 기분이 좋았다. 그리고 더 모티베이션이 많았다. 독일에 대한 관심이 더 늘었다. 그렇게 굉장히 그러니까 그때까지도 그러니까 저희가 만났을 때가 베를린에 다녀간 지 1년이 넘었던 시간인데 마치 어제 경험이었었던 것처럼 이야기하는 걸 봤습니다. 그리고 2015년부터 저희가 이제 공동 워크숍을 그러면은 추진을 한다라고 하고서는 저희 학교하고 김일성대 역사학부에 공동으로 연구할 수 있는 주제들이 있거든요. 그건 저희 학교가 지금 그러니까 조선 시대의 서원을 연구를 하고 있는데 남한에서는 남쪽에 있는 서원만 연구를 합니다. 지금 그러니까 유네스코의 세계 문화유산으로 남쪽에 있는 서원이 등재되어 있는데 실제로는 북에도 서원들이 남아 있거든요. 그리고 더 중요한 거는 율곡 선생이 만들었던 서원, 그러니까 우리나라 기호, 그러니까 서쪽 라인이죠. 기호 라인의 가장 중요한 서원은 소현 서원인데 이 서원은 유네스코 등재에 빠졌습니다. 그래서 북한과 그러니까 김일성대학의 역사학부와 저희 학교 저희 연구팀이 같이 북한의 소현 서원을 조사를 하고 있습니다. 소현 서원 답사했던 모습인데요. 이거는 뭐 그러니까 저희가 굉장히 저희 팀이 그러니까 북한하고 그러니까 김일성대학하고 커퍼레이션 함으로써 저희가 굉장히 많이 배울 좋은 기회를 가질 수 있었던 거죠. 그러니까 소현서원의 최근 사진을 찍어온 거는 저희가 처음이라고 합니다. 그런데 그 덕에 저희가 2018년에 이제 저희 학교 연구소의 건물을 새로 이전할 때 연구소 건물에 상냥식, 그러니까 작은 정자를 짓는데 이 상냥식을 할 때 남북한 대사가 같이 만나서 베를린에서 같이 만나서 상냥식에 그러니까 저희 그 상냥 기둥 있죠. 대들보에 상냥문을 같이 심고 상냥을 같이 올리는 그러니까 분위기가 굉장히 좋은 시기였죠. 2018년에는 이러한 분위기도 있을 수 있었고요. 그런 그러니까 그보다 그러니까 이런 정치적인 의미보다 더 좋은 것은 그러니까 김일성대학의 평양에서 만나는 연구자들이 가끔 외국으로 나올 수 있을 때 저희들이 훨씬 더 평양에서보다 더 자유롭게 토론이 가능했었던 것 같습니다. 그리고 구체적으로 이제 공동 연구 성과를 낸다는 건 뭐냐면 공동으로 연구 페이퍼를 만들어서 그러니까 작성을 해서 발표를 하는 거죠. 저희 이제 첫 단계 사업은 이렇게 시작이 됐습니다. 그래서 노아키 교수하고 같은 경우에는 이미 공동 페이퍼가 저널에 발표가 되었고요. 그다음에 이제 다음번 소현서원 답사하고 길주향교 답사를 하게 된다면은 그에 관해서도 저희가 공동으로 페이퍼를 작성할 것입니다. 서원 연구팀에서 이 사진은 저희가 한 번도 밖에 안 보여드렸던 것인데요. 언론인들 이 사진은 밖으로 보내지 말아주세요. 여기에 그러니까 김일성대의 인민대학습당에는 우리나라 고문서가 굉장히 많습니다. 그런데 그것이 아직까지도 그러니까 남쪽에서 디지털로 사용을 할 수가 없거든요. 근데 남쪽에 남아 있는 고문서와 북쪽에 남아 있는 고문서를 합치면 우리나라 전체 고문서의 풀 세트가 되는데 아직 그게 연결이 안 돼 있고, 저희는 소연 서원 같은 경우에는 그 고문서가 있어야지만 소연 서원에 관한 연구를 할 수 있기 때문에 가서 그러니까 소연 서원 자료가 얼만큼 있었나 실제로 확인을 했는데 실물로 봤습니다. 그래서 그러니까 실물로 볼 수 있었다고 하니까 아무도 안 믿으려고 하시더라고요. 그래서 이번에는 사진을 가져왔어요. 저희가 실물로 봤었던 거를 보여드리려고요. 저 앞에 저희 작게 보이는 그러니까 문서 있잖아요. 이거는 소현서원의 재산 목록입니다. 그 재산 목록에 그러니까 저게 1580 몇 년도에 만들어진 재산 목록인데, 그러니까 누가 얼마큼 기증을 했는지에 대해 나온 작업들입니다. 그리고 인민대학습당에서 저희가 서원지를 확인했던 모습이고요. 그런데 저희 학교의 이 교류협력 사업의 중요한 의미는 그러니까 한국학을 연구하는 사람들만 이 협력 사업에 참여하는 것이 아니라 저희가 몇 차례 그러니까 북한을 방문하면서 저희 델리게이션에 학교 내 지리학, 그다음 생태학, 그리고 의학 팀이 들어가 있습니다. 그래서 김일성 종합대학도 종합대학이기 때문에 다양한 분야의 학자들이 있고, 한 팀은 산림 전공하는 선생님들하고 워크숍을 했고, 한 팀은 그러니까 해안 갯벌 갯벌 전공하는 선생님들하고 워크숍을 한 팀이 있고, 하나는 의료 그러니까 보건의료 그 기팍 선생님하고도 같이 연결이 되는 팀이거든요. 그래서 국제 보건의료에 관해서 그러니까 워크숍을 하고 갈 때마다 워크숍 팀이 달라집니다. 그리고서는 마지막 저 사진은 연구 협력에서 김일성 종합대에서 원하는 거는 그러니까 학교 전체에 교류 협력 양해각서가 체결되어 있지만 또 연구 사업을 하나씩 할 때는 그거에 해당하는 계약을 체결해 주기를 원합니다. 그래서 김일성대학교의 국제협력처장하고 저하고 그러니까 연구 사업별로 사업하기로 협력 체결하는 과정입니다. 잠깐만요. 그리고 나서 한국에서 굉장히 관심 많았었던 부분이 이것이었던 것 같은데요. 김일성 종합대학의 학생들을 저희가 2020년입니다. 2020년 1월, 그러니까 2019년도 아니고 2020년 1월 코비드 발생해서 북한이 문을 닫기 바로 직전에 마지막 주죠. 그때 저희가 김일성대 학생들을 12명, 그러니까 김일성대 동문과 도이치 강자라고 하는데 동문과 학생들 12명하고 교수 2명을 베를린으로 초청해서 3주 동안 저희 학교에서 진행하는 겨울 계절학기에 참가하게 했던 것입니다. 저희 학교의 계절학기 프로그램은 150명의 학생들이 전 세계에서 옵니다. 그래서 2020년 계절학기 같은 경우에는 14개 국가에서 학생들이 참여했고, 그 중에서 절반 이상은 남쪽에서 온 남한 대학의 학생들입니다. 그때 홍익대, 건국대, 충남대, 부산대 학생들이 다양한 대학의 학생들이 그러니까 참여를 했는데, 이 대학생들은 몰랐죠. 김일성 대학의 학생들이 오는 줄 모르고 80명의 학생들이 남쪽에서 참여를 했습니다. 그래서 북한 대학생 12명, 그다음에 남쪽 대학생 80명을 합치면은 150명 중에 92명이 그러니까 코리안들이 이 계절학기에 들어갔었던 건데요. 유감스럽게도 북한 학생들이 독일어를 너무 잘해가지고 북한 학생들은 그 반편성을 하는데 가장 높은 C1에 많이 들어가고, 그다음 B2, B1에 들어갔는데 남쪽 학생들은 전부 A1, A2로 들어갔어요. 근데 남한 학생 중에 가장 잘하는 학생 몇 명이 B1하고 B2 그룹에 들어가서 B1, B2에 있는 7명의 북한 학생들은 남한 학생들 10명하고 같이 수업을 했거든요. 그런데 저쪽 오른쪽에 보시는 사진처럼 첫날 입학식 때는 남한 학생들이 큰 강당에 같이 모여 있는데, 그날은 이제 KBS에서 북한 학생들이 왔다는 걸 보도를 했었거든요. 그래서 그거를 봤으니까 저 학생들이 북에서 왔다는 걸 아는데 저만 자꾸 쳐다보면서 나중에는 와서 선생님 저 학생들한테 말 걸어도 돼요? 그렇게 묻더라고요. 그래서 당연하지요. 말하세요. 그러니까 살살 가서 묻는데 굉장히 두려워했어요. 그러니까 북한 학생들을 실물로 봤다는 게 두렵다는 느낌이 너무 그러니까 그게 이 우리 학생들 남한 학생들의 머릿속에 있는 장벽이 얼마나 높은 건가 저희가 느꼈고요. 한 학생은 김일성대 교수 선생님한테 가더니 선생님 손 한번 만져봐도 됩니까? 하더라고요. 그러니까 손을 이렇게 해서 이 사람이 진짜 사람인지 아닌지 만져보는 것 같은 느낌이었었습니다. 처음에 시작할 때 그렇게 쭈삣쭈삣하고 굉장히 서먹서먹하게 시작을 했는데 마지막 사진은 이게 종강식이거든요. 종강식 날은 이 종강식 하는 강당이 시끄러워가지고 저희가 애들 어디 놀이터에 온 것 같다라는 느낌을 받았는데요. 그 이유는 남북한 학생들이 떠드는데 너무 시끄러운 거예요. 그러니까 남북한 학생들이 기숙사에서 같이 살았거든요. 그러니까 겨울 학기 어학 코스에 오는 학생들은 한 기숙사에 살았습니다. 그런데 기숙사에서 어학 코스까지 1시간 동안 이제 대중교통을 이용해서 매일 통학을 했어야 됐는데 같이 다니죠. 서울 어울려서. 그러니까 김일성 대학교 그 담당 교수 선생님이 한번 오시더니 통학할 때 시끄러 죽겠다고 애들이 하도 떠들어가지고 버스 속에서 그 정도로 그러니까 자연스럽게 어울렸었던 거를 봤습니다. 그런데 놀라웠었던 건 저희 학교에 한국인 유학생들이 굉장히 많거든요. 지금 그러니까 박사 과정에 있는 유학생들이 굉장히 많은데 이 학생들이 3주 동안 학교를 안 왔어요. 이유가 뭐냐면 그러니까 한국인 박사과정생들은 어른이잖아요. 근데 이 학생들은 본인들이 북한 사람을 우연이라도 만나면은 국가보안법에 걸려서 나중에 처벌받을 수도 있을 거라는 생각에서 아예 3주 동안 학교를 안 왔더라고요. 그리고서는 북한 학생들이 돌아가고 난 다음에 제가 이제 박사과정생들이 안 보이길래 모여라. 그래서 세미나 때 무슨 일이냐 그랬더니 고백하는 게 무서워서 못 왔습니다. 그러더라고요. 그래서 우리나라 학생들뿐만 아니라 많은 사람들이 지금 국가보안법이 얼마나 우리 머릿속에 그런 장벽을 만들어줬나 하는 것을 제가 느꼈습니다. 근데 이 문서를 제가 가지고 온 이유는 뭐냐면 이거는요 유엔 안보리에서 저희 학교에 그러니까 제재를 어긴 적이 있느냐 없느냐를 확인하는 편지를 보낸 것입니다. 자유대학교가 진행하고 있는 김일성대학과의 교류협력 사업이 제재를 어기느냐 안 어기느냐를 검토를 하겠다고 보고를 내라고 저희 학교에 유엔 안보리에서 제 이름까지 이제 딱 거론을 해가지고 편지가 왔습니다. 그래서 우리 학교는 난리가 발칵 났죠. 그러니까 어떻게 유엔 안보리에서 자유대학교에다 이런 편지를 보내냐. 그러니까는 총장단도 긴장을 탁 했는데 그래서 저희 국제협력처하고 저하고 상의를 했어요. 그래 우리 그러니까 잘못한 거 하나도 없으니까 우리가 한 게 뭔지를 2011년부터 지금까지 제가 말씀드린 것처럼 찬찬히 전부 다 정리를 해서 보고를 하자. 그렇게 해가지고 정리를 해서 보고를 했거든요. 그런데 흥미있었던 거는 이 문서가 저희한테만 간 것이 아니라 김일성 대학교 홈페이지에 보시면은 6개 대학에 전 세계 6개 대학이 그러니까 몇몇 대학이 김일성 대학과 교류 협력을 하고 있다고 파트너 대학이라고 홈페이지에 나옵니다. 근데 그 이야기를 독일의 외무부의 외교관이 유엔 안보리에다 읽는 거예요. 그러니까 김일성 대학하고 교류 협력한다고 일렀어요. 그러니까 저희가 협력하는 거를 별로 마음에 안 들어하던 데가 어디냐면은 독일 외교부였거든요. 그러니까 저희는 독일 의회하고 독일 대통령실로부터는 절대적인 지원을 받고 한국 통일부에서도 당시 그러니까는 2015년에 홍영표 장관이 저희 학교에 오셔가지고 이 사업은 절대적으로 성공으로 만들어야 된다라고 얘기를 하셨거든요. 그런데 독일 외무부만 왜 저렇게 하냐라고 저희가 평양에 갔을 때 저희한테 세계에서 가장 악랄한 독재자의 국가에 있는 대학하고 어떻게 자유대가 협력을 할 수 있냐고 대놓고 외교관이 저한테 얘기를 했었거든요. 그런데 이 문서가 와서 저희는 이제 두려울 거 없으니까 보고하자 해서 정리를 해서 보고를 했는데 나중에 안보리 얘기를 물어보니까 6개 대학 전체한테 갔는데 나머지 학교는 전부 다 우리는 그런 사실 없어요 하고 딱 보고를 거부하고 안 했대요. 근데 저희만 보고서를 보냈는데 이게 저희한테는 오히려 전화위복이 된 게 뭐냐면 저희가 보고를 하고 난 다음에 안보리에서 저희한테 확인서를 보내줬어요. 그러니까 김일성 대학하고 자유대학 간의 교류 협력 사업은 지금까지 진행된 어떤 형태든 제재를 어긴 것이 하나도 없다. 그러니까 지금까지 하던 대로 하면 된다. 그렇게 확인서를 받았어요. 어떻게 보면은 이제 북한하고 교류 협력하라는 라이센스를 받은 거죠. 그러니까 저희 총장단에서는 오히려 이제 잘하는 거네, 두려움 그러니까 걱정할 거 하나도 없어. 그렇게 해서 이제 교류 협력 사업에서 지금 공동 연구하는 서원 연구 사업하고 더 하나 확대해서 사전 편찬 작업을 하자고 했거든요. 그래서 북한에서는 조독 사전이라고 하죠. 그러니까는 Korean, North Korean German 딕셔너리를 만들자고 했거든요. 그래서 그 사업을 이거는 디지털로도 진행이 될 수 있으니까는 지속적으로 추진을 하고 있는데 코로나 때문에 저희가 가지 못하고 오지 못하는 것이 조금 안타깝기는 하지만 이메일로 계속 교류 협력을 하면서 북한 외교관들이 저희 학교에 와서 학생들을 위한 특강까지 해줄 정도로 그러니까 교류 협력 사업에서 그러니까 아주 작은 단위에서 그러니까 저희는 교류 협력 사업이라고 하지도 않고요. 그냥 파트너샤프트에서 할 수 있는 모든 것은 할 수 있다. 이거는 제재하고는 전혀 상관이 없는 일이고 중요한 것은 냉전 시기에 유럽에 교류가 가능했었던 것은 대학 간의 교류가 있었기 때문이거든요. 학자들 간의 교류, 학생들 간의 교류가 있었기 때문이라는 걸 저희 선생님들이 워낙에 잘 알기 때문에 유럽의 냉전 시기에 그 경험을 바탕으로 지금 자유대학이 할 수 있는 일을 최대한으로 하자 하는 것이 저희들의 결론이었습니다. 그리고 이 편지를 보여드리는 이유도 경기도나 한국에서도 그러니까 할 수 있는 단위의 작은 그러니까 아까 김주성 선생님이 NGO들을 말씀을 하셨는데요. 그러니까 정부가 나서지 않더라도 충분히 가능한 일들이 그러니까 구체적으로 찾는다면은 있는데 그것이 너무 정치적인 색이 너무 강해지다 보면은 거부감이 느껴질 수도 있을 것입니다. 근데 저희는 전혀 정치적인 색을 띠지 않는 사업이기 때문에 이게 지금도 가능하다라고 볼 수 있고요. 그래서 그러니까 지금 이 사업 때문에 한국의 대학들이 저희한테 굉장히 많이 문의를 하고 있어요. 그러니까는 가능하면은 같이 할 수 있겠느냐. 그런데 너무 또 키우다 보면은 판이 커지다 보면 정치색이 들어가는 게 될 것 같아서 저희도 굉장히 조심하고 있는 상황입니다. 그렇지만 이 일은 앞으로도 계속 진행될 거고 진행되고 있습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yoon-jung. Well, it's a really new information. We are possibly to make some network between the universities in Korea or in Germany or in the States or other countries. Under the role of the United Nations. It's a good example. Thank you. Well, time is over. So I'm very sorry I couldn't give you any time for your questions. Please understand this situation. And now I would like to close. Well, yes.
There is a proposal from Madame Angela Kane. They came from all the way. She came from all the way Vienna and etc. Therefore, we should extend your discussion at least 10 to 15 minutes so that there can be a discussion.
Okay.
So that I hope that
Right.
because Angela has one comment.
Thank you. Welcome your comment.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I found it very, very rich presentations, and I know we have very little time, so I'm going to confine myself to 2 points, and also that goes back to what Lee-Jung said about the United Nations. And what I wanted to say is there are 2 aspects that I think are very hurtful for North Korea, if you want. And first of all, in the Security Council, it's the United States that's the pen holder on the drafting of anything that has to do with the DPRK. And basically what it means, a pen holder means that that is the country that is responsible for the language that appears. And what very often happens is you have the elected 10, the 10 members that join every 2 years, and then basically they are being presented with a draft, and then they're being told, well, the other 4 members, permanent members, have already agreed, so they have very little input in terms of the drafting of this. And frankly, I think there should be an effort made to change it from the US as a pen holder, but rather to have another country, primarily, I think, the Europeans. Why am I saying the Europeans? Because the Europeans have traditionally held the Sanctions Committee chairmanship or presidency or whatever. And so the 17-18 committee on the sanctions is currently Norway. Switzerland is joining the Security Council as of January, and I think that, I don't know yet, the negotiations haven't finished yet, but I think it's very likely that Switzerland will take over the chairmanship of the committee, of the 17-18 committee. I had a look at the mandate of the Sanctions Committee, and this is not the Sanctions Committee, but the panel of experts. There are 8 experts on this sanctions panel of experts. And the mandate is purely punitive. But on the other hand, it also has exemptions. And it also has in its mandate, it has outreach activities. And to my mind, you have to build on whatever is in the language to sort of say you can interpret it in a particular way. That's not happening. It's only interpreted very unilaterally in terms of the sanctions, in terms of the punitive aspect. And I think that needs to be changed. And the other aspect about about the panel of experts and the mandate is that they have primary exemptions. And there is nothing on education, I just want to tell you that, because I just looked it up, nothing at all. So that is perfectly legitimate to have educational exchanges. But rather what it also has, it basically sort of says that the primary exemptions are all the food and medicine, etc. And what I think should be happening is that you not only hear about if there's an exemption asked, but actually what is the impact of it. You can change mandates. And this is something that I find very sad, that it's never been attempted before. And I think that that's also a role for South Korea and other countries that want to help North Korea to basically have impact on what could be done to change the mandate and to change the approach that's being taken. Thank you.
장관님, 우리 영국에서 오신 토니 미첼 선생님께서 한 말씀 하셨습니다.
네, 감사합니다. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If I can make one criticism about this morning's sessions, too much history, not enough future, with honourable exceptions. But I would really like, I have the feeling that even when we're talking about the future, we'll be here next year talking about that same future and same argument. I would like to hear what we are doing in September 2022 to get on with communications with North Korea. I've been asked to sponsor, on behalf of another German Stiftung, talks which are entitled Global Carbon Markets and the Role of DPRK, which is basically about climate. So these online Zoom exchanges with Pyongyang will take place later this month. At the same time, our Pyeongsu pharmaceutical factory continues to work in North Korea, and we have had until the inauguration of President Yoon, or election of President Yoon, a group of Koreans who were going to fund the manufacture of necessary pharmaceuticals in Pyongyang, in the same way that we've been doing it for the Red Cross and for other international organizations, UNICEF. This is because the border is a bit more fluid between China and North Korea, so we can import the basic ingredients that we need in order to make proper quality to GMP standard. So I believe that there are other people who are doing these kinds of things here in Gyeonggi-do. We need to have a kind of forum which is, what are we doing this month? What are we doing next month? And not having these far distant future ideas. So my suggestion for next time.
Thank you. Well, Dr. Moon, Do you have any comments on two? 네. 좋습니다. Well, thank you and your cooperation. And now the time to close this session. But I would like to invite two presenters to say something finally and make a response to the comments and also making a conclusion of the session. First, you. Dr. Novak. Yeah, wait, three persons. First, yes, Glenn Ford, and Dr. Novak, and Dr. Yoon-jung.
If I'm first, I realize we have very little time. I'll be very brief. One thing the general impression is that North Korea is not talking to anybody. They're certainly not talking to the United States, and they're certainly not talking to South Korea in any even semi-public way. They are attempting to talk to the European Union, and it's one of the points I should have made, because the embassy in Berlin has reached out to the European Union on several occasions recently to try and engage in some kind of dialogue. So it's not true that the North Koreans aren't prepared to speak to anyone. The problem we've got is getting the Europeans to speak to the North Koreans rather than the other way around. The second point I'd make is in the sense of the UN Security Council and the rest. We generally talk about US sanctions, and in a sense the financial restrictions that are US, and they are important. But the North Koreans are realistic. They're not looking for the lifting of US sanctions, because they know it will never get through Congress. They want the US to agree to the lifting of UN sanctions. And I think it's an important distinction, because that's something that can be done by the president without involving Congress in that sense, which is, so that's important. And the last point I'd make is, we really need to get control of the 1718 committee, because they know that education's not covered, but they also know if you write these letters, everybody panics. It has a chilling effect. To try and get other universities to engage with North Korean universities when they know that someone's had a letter from the UN Sanctions Committee is not the way to get vice chancellors to sign off on these kind of things. Because I know from experience, because there was an attempt to do something with the university, with Chris Patton's university, I think it was at Cambridge, and it was, no, we're going to get letters.
Thank you for your very clear clarifications and very helpful. Well, Dr. Novak.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can I speak? May I speak?
Yes.
Okay, I agree with what Lynn just said. I had 4 meetings with Ri Soo-young, the then most powerful person in the country. He's very realistic. But what they want as a first step is that South Korea lifts the sanctions, Kaesong, the famous mountains, and others. The second step is, I have been at the University of Kim Il-sung University. The training is excellent. And we had to learn language, and we have to learn Korean to deal with them. And I think I have worked in the United Nations, therefore my trust in the United Nations is very low. But I can believe that, defend again, the Grundlagenvertrag, the basic treaty, this can be started, and as I say to the colleague with the blue shirt, that immediately, not openly, how to have come to a good neighborhood. Maybe this province could make a first step, and I am really ready to help you. And last, there are still contacts possible between the South and the North, and they know who they have to call, and they know who will give the information. But why not make a daring first step? This is very important. And last but not least, languages help. Ri Soo-young, the most powerful people, I didn't know that he speaks French. And my second language is French, much better than English. And then we spoke French. Agreement, much easier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And
So, yeah.
Dr. Yoon-jung.
Yeah, actually, I told everything what I can and what I should, I think. But the idea to build a network of the universities to build up the cooperation with the Kim Il-sung University. But there in North Korea, there is not just the Kim Il-sung University. There are a lot of another universities, and they are very good. But the cooperation between the universities is limited. You can't have a cooperation in a science field or in a techniques. It is not allowed. Even in a education, but it's not allowed to have to build up engineering sciences. We excluded all these faculties. We had just humanities and social sciences. In this field is no problem. So I think we could have more chance if we have a European network, more universities in Europe. So I would try to talk with the universities. So as colleagues, it would be different when you are talk as politicians to them. I will see, but it would be really, I would be very happy to have partners in Gyeonggi provinces when the universities here to join to the network. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, on behalf of all the participants, I really extend my appreciation to the Free University of Berlin and Sejong Institute, and also all the staff of this conference. I really appreciate it very much. And also the the participants who are joining in this conference. And we expect to have a second Korea-Europe Peace Forum, maybe next year in Europe. Maybe we expect that, and particularly we are really expect the leadership of Dr. Moon, who is head of the Sejong Institute.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Minister Lee. I think this was really wonderful and productive. Please have a seat there. I will just conclude very briefly. And in fact, on behalf of organizers, I would like to express my cordial thanks to the two sponsors, the Gyeonggi province. Where are the staff from Gyeonggi province? Stand up and let us give big applause. Okay. And also, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung of Germany also was a kind, sponsor of the program. We have Henning Effner, and obviously, and this is the product of a cooperation between Free University Berlin, Professor Lee, and the Sejong Institute, President Sang-hyun Lee. Okay. And as Minister Lee pointed out, we are planning to continue to this kind of project. Therefore, during the DMZ forum, we'll be inviting Europeans to here. Hopefully next year, we are hoping to bring the former head of states and former foreign ministers and defense ministers, whatever, so that we can have a very meaningful opening session of the DMZ forum. At the same time, we'll be housing this Korea-Europe Peace Forum in a DMZ forum. Therefore, we'll continue next year, and I hope the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung will continue to support us. But another important point is this: sometime early part of next year or later part of next year, hopefully the governor of Gyeonggi Province, Kim Dong-yeon, and his delegation could visit Berlin, and we can have big meetings. And as Glenn suggests, the Gyeonggi delegation can visit Brussels and Strasbourg, and have a more meaningful, venue for cooperation between Gyeonggi Province and the European Union. Okay, and also when the delegation visit in Berlin, we can have meetings, and also they can pay a visit to government leaders and parliamentary leaders. But as Ki Park suggested, we may really think about having some kinds of agreed framework for cooperation and exchange between the North and the South, and also between North Korea and the rest of the world. In doing that, we can invite government officials from North Korea, government officials from South Korea, and hopefully United Nations, maybe Secretary General's Office of the United Nations can play some kinds of mediating role in drafting that kind of agreed framework for mutual cooperation and exchange during that meeting, you know. And I think that was a really wonderful idea, so that we can insulate, you know, non-political and military, you know, exchange and cooperation from political and military affairs, so that we can assure, you know, consistency of our mutual cooperation. And I think that was a really excellent idea. And also, there were, you know, through this forum, we come up with some very interesting ideas. For example, Ki Park proposed that Harvard Medical School is more than willing to cooperate with the Gyeonggi province in making proposals to North Korea on public health and medical cooperation. And I think that's a very good item. Yeah. And another item is, for example, Professor Song Nam-sun of International Society for Korean Studies, you know, could come up with some ideas, okay, to bring South Korean scholars, and mostly primarily from the Gyeonggi province universities, like Aju University and several other, Gyeonggi University and etc. You know, they can bring scholars from the universities in Gyeonggi province, okay, and also, you know, Professor Song has been working with Kim Il-sung University and North Korea's in Academy of Social Science and whatever, and then they can meet in Germany, and we can have that kinds of project too. And also, as a result of this kind of meeting, we can put together, you know, an expert who can deal with, you know, expert panel at the, you know, United Nations, okay, and how to deal with United Nations, even how to deal with the United States. You know, we have two major, in fact, three major barriers. One is, you know, UN sanctions. Another barrier is U.S. unilateral sanctions. Third is self-imposed sanctions by North Korea. Okay, but I think when COVID-19 situation it gets stabilized, North Korea will open. We all know it. Okay, and then we'll have two remaining barriers. One is UN barriers. Another is American barriers. And I think we can put together some expert to deal with those two barriers. And finally, you know, the Yoon Suk-yeol government, even though it has been pursuing hardline policy on North Korea, President Yoon Suk-yeol proposed the audacious initiative on North Korea. That he wanted to pursue a two-track approach. On nuclear issues, tough, but other issues he's willing to open. And I hope he keep his words. And if that being the case, there won't be any contradiction between our central government and Gyeonggi province, and that will lead us, you know, really meaningful progress. And Mr. Lee, yeah, where is Mr. Lee? He went out. Did you secure the budget? Is there budget for next year? 내년도 예산이 돼 있는 거예요? 아니면 또? Yeah, I know, you know, there will be continuing support for this project with that one. And I'll conclude in this session. I really appreciate all the Wolfgang Novak. He loves South Korea, but he was locked up in the room since last Monday until, you know, next Monday. Even I haven't seen him, but apparently his contagious power has been weakened. Therefore, I hope I can visit you this afternoon, and also. Going forward, he flew from. Did you flew from Manchester or Brussels? Where did you come from? He's a global trotter. Therefore, he travels all the world. And Professor Eun-jung Lee, she usually have, you know, many hats, but she in fact was attending German South Korean parliamentary and consultative body on unification. But then. She spared the time for us. And also, we have a first session, Ki Park. He left. He's seeing the Ambassador Sung Kim at 2:30. Therefore, he had to leave early, but he's, as usual, very busy. And also, Marko, you know, Haskanen, you know, he flew from, you know, Finland, but because of Ukrainian war, he could not fly from Helsinki to Seoul directly. Therefore, he had the detour through Istanbul, a southern route. Therefore, it usually about 8 hours from here to Helsinki, but it took more than 12 hours, you know. And But anyhow, thank you very much, Marco, coming to here. And also, Professor Song Nam-sun, you are the International Society for Korean Studies, the only organization which could bring North Korean scholars paper, 20 papers, last August 8th. Therefore, you are the living witness that the North Korea is willing to engage. Okay, and I think that we were able to bring together really leading experts in North Korea, and not only just in terms of academic area, but also in terms of actual engagement with North Korea. And I hope we can continue this tradition so that we can make a major breakthrough to current tension on the Korean Peninsula, so that we can bring current conflict into some kind of lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. I again thank you, all of you, and also particularly President Sang-hyun Lee. He has been working very hard. Let us give a big applause to Sang-hyun Lee. Okay, with these remarks, I will conclude this session. I again thank you very much, and particularly Minister Lee Jae-jung. He stepped down as a superintendent of education of Gyeonggi province, but he has was in kind of a hermit mode, but he willingly accepted serving as a moderator of this session because he was a Minister of Unification during the Second Korean Summit, 2007. Therefore, he was a key architect of 2007 October Pyongyang Summit Declaration. And because of that background, he was kind enough to come to here and serve as a moderator. Let us give a big applause to him one more time. And also, the keynote speaker of this forum, Angela Kane. I just missed Angela Kane, but Angela is, after having served as Undersecretary of the United Nations, now she retired. She's staying in Vienna. She's serving as Vice President of Institute of Peace there, and therefore Angela can be very useful resources for us to expanding the scope of cooperation in European theater. Angela, thank you. Okay, with this I'll conclude. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. This concludes the 2022 Korea-Europe Peace Forum. Thank you.